Alice was putting things in order on the mezzanine, almost through tears. Whatever thing you pick up, there is something connected with each one. Old shoes, carefully filled with newspapers and still packed in their original boxes. An artificial Christmas tree folded into 3 pieces. A box, sabers, garlands that still managed to shine in the hands of the husband. Cardboard treasure with Christmas decorations, ski equipment. She froze for a second. Treacherous tears appeared in her gray eyes, not wanting to dry. Children should not see her melancholy and hopelessness. Away with sadness. We need to get together. I remembered my mother's voice. The top closet is a collection of unnecessary rubbish. I will definitely get there and throw everything from there in the trash. Didn't get there, didn't get out, did not make it. Not only did the mischievous neighbor like to joke about Alice's father that she was born from a visiting young man, but also her mother burned out within a week. The doctor's verdict sounded ominous. Awakening of an "You came to us too late, my dear. Severe internal bleeding. We couldn't do anything, even on the operating table. Time was lost." Well, so the surgeon in the blue uniform looked with pity at the girl folded on the couch near the operating unit and hurried to disappear out of sight into the labyrinths of the hospital corridor. Alice was left an absolute orphan. Now she had no one in this world. Yes, my mother sometimes complained of stomach pain, but it came as a shock to Alice that this would be a death sentence. Stern, formidable, she raised and pulled her daughter until she was 20 years old, almost taught her, and also managed to keep order in the courtyard of their old 5-story building. First as the best janitor in the entire area, then as a worker. So she proved herself in all guises, so that all the authorities were always calm in this house. Neither the tenants, nor the electricians, nor the plumbers will spoil you. Sandra will quickly bring everyone to their senses. My mother was a homegrown intellectual with a secondary school education. I spent all my free time reading books avidly. Fortunately, the social library in the neighboring house diligently sowed the reasonable, good, and eternal to the masses. She wrote competently and expressed her thoughts. In life, you can't tell which one is from the wipers. She knew household needs by heart. The entire large community service team literally prayed for her. I got a 2-room apartment at my place of work just 5 years ago. Before that, I huddled in the service closet for the janitors with my daughter. And when a lonely old woman died on the first floor, they provided her with housing for many years of efforts. Now Alice has got her apartment. The girl graduated from school. Well, easily entered the Pedagogical Institute and dreamed of teaching children English language and literature. When Sandra passed away, she had just finished her 4th year. There was still practice at school ahead, and then defense of my diploma. It was just unclear what to live on now, how the mother made ends meet with her salary, and even dressed her daughter decently was a mystery to Alice. The stash in the bookcase, in a metal box, ran out almost immediately. It's good that the residents chipped in for the funeral expenses, and the communal office workers took care of the rest. After sitting for a month on cereals, pasta, potatoes, and tea with sugar, Sandra always made food supplies from her salary. Alice clearly understood. She urgently needed to look for some kind of work. She would not last long without new cash injections. A month later, she began a 6-month teaching practice. This means she can only work in the evenings. How can one not remember how many successful businessmen and movie stars began their careers? The answer lay on the surface. Become a waitress in some cafe or bar. A suitable place was found surprisingly quickly. At the favorite beer bar, which makes money from broadcasting sporting events accompanied by beer drinks and light snacks. A waitress has just quit. The lively girl's patience ran out, and all because the audience in the hall, with a huge TV on the entire wall, showed their joy over goals scored or grief over missed goals in a unique way. In an impulse, some red-haired fellow would pour the remaining beer directly into the round recess in the center of the table and let a small aquarium fish swim into it. Another character could kick a waitress walking past a table with a full tray. The third subject, at the sight of the impending failure of his favorite team, generally pushed food from the table, jumped up angrily, and began to cut circles around other tables, not allowing the worker with the next portions of the foamy catalyst of emotions to freely move around the hall. The director of the establishment saw the outrage, but their bar was on the outskirts of the city. The contingent in it was made up of local workers. They didn't seriously damage the property. They made some noise and then peacefully went home. Even fights happened only a couple of times and ended at the very beginning with a couple of slaps in the face without harming the strong male health. Alice was told about the vacancy at the favorite bar by the same neighbor Nura, who knew all the news in the area before the police and local gossips. She grabbed the girl at the entrance and sarcastically whispered in her ear, "You seem to be looking for a job that wasn't dusty. So I found you a position. Do you know the favorite bar? There today, the waitress ran away straight from her shift. Go and talk to him. The director is a normal guy. He won't offend." Favorite greeted Alice with the clink of glass beer mugs. In the distance, in an empty hall without visitors, a muffled whisper could be heard. Dishwashers and cleaning ladies were talking among themselves. The latter had just frantically polished the floor to a perfect shine. But curiosity got the better of. And where did our director gallop to? Does he think that an hour before opening, he will find some fool to take his place? Nobody wants to put up with this tipsy coddle. I told him so many times, take my sister as a waitress, but he refused. He says, she's old. Where have you seen a woman ride off a scrap at 47 years old? Let him now suffer without a waitress. I also offered him my sister. She's only 40 years old. And he refuses. He only wants a younger girl for our hot guy clients so that their blood will boil from her too. Behind the wall, two young guys quickly took pizza dough pieces out of cardboard boxes, then pushed them into a large machine. A new acquisition in Alex's pride. He coated the paid test bases with mayonnaise and then put fillings on them. Sometimes with sausage, sometimes with fish, sometimes just with grated cheese and olives. Alex didn't have a large kitchen here. The hottest option is piping hot pizza. For snacks, there is an endless amount of beans, industrially prepared baked goods, dried and smoked fish, chips, dried squid rings, spices, small fish in bags, nuts sprinkled with spices, cheeses, sliced smoked sausage, toasted bread, crackers with salt and pepper. It's impossible to list everything. At the favorite bar, they didn't bother with plates, forks, spoons, and knives, and included all the disposable plastic utensils they used on their customers' bill. Another thing is beer mugs. There's a whole collection of them lined up on the shelf above them. The owner imported this glass goods from all the cities where it was brought. Exquisite options are for VIP clients. The owner brought them from Prague and Munich, which is simpler. He took them here in souvenir shops. It was in this splendor that I met the waitress on my doorstep for the first time in a bar for sports fans. Only not a single bartender out of the 3 working here has yet been there. They'll be there by the start of the shift. They are the elite among the staff. The girl went up the steps, resolutely pushed the door and froze, her eyes adjusting to the twilight in the huge hall. Everyone present in the establishment, like dummies, turned their heads towards the open doorway. In front of them stood a young girl of average height, a fine figure, an inquisitive look of dark gray eyes, a light brown fluffy tail of hair, carelessly collected with a bright hairpin that had slipped down a little. Light summer jeans, a t-shirt with an intricate print, light white sneakers on her feet. That, in fact, is the whole portrait of the stranger. "Oh, good afternoon," Alice said loudly. "Can I see Alex, your director?" "Why do you need him?" Kate responded smartly. "He's not here now. He's gone on business. I'm in no particular hurry." Alice chuckled. How is that?" The curious women immediately perked up. "If I don't get a job here tomorrow, then I'll go around the world with my bags," Alice calmly explained to them. And there was so much bitterness in her words that Kate and her interlocutor somehow immediately forgot all the barbs, propped their cheeks with their hands like women, and, waiting for confession, stared with all 4 eyes at the girl. Everyone craned their necks to hear better. "Yes, I won't tell you anything particularly interesting, my dears. A student at a pedagogical university became an orphan a little over a month ago. I'll have to go to practice in the morning soon, and with my scholarship, I can only pay for utilities and then buy bread and milk for myself, nothing more. I live 2 blocks from here. If your boss hires me, I will try not to let any of you down." Everyone turned their heads at the sound of the door opening again at the same time. Alex himself squeezed into the establishment, again with a cardboard box in his hands. "Did you bring new glasses and new mugs again?" Kate called out to him in a familiar way. They had known each other for more than 1 year. Once upon a time, in her youth, the woman behind the counter in his first beer bar stood still 20 years ago. Then she gave up. She grew older, but she didn't want to part with her director in the least. So she followed her boss from bar to bar until they organized everything here from scratch, taking over the old diner from the careless owners. Kate crawled every centimeter in the hall on her elbows and knees, cleaned and cleaned. Everything around began to shine with purity and newness, and people flocked to favor it immediately after the opening. "While you were traveling, we already found a new waitress for us. The intelligentsia is no match for me, but the girl is good. As a team, we have already conducted an interview with her. It's suitable. Let's take it. Today we'll check it in action, and we'll think about what and how. Let them work with Alice four-handed." That's how it began, the first working day in Alice's life, which even then determined her entire future fate. By the beginning of her teaching practice, Alice had already become so comfortable in the bar that the rest of the employees began to think that such an unpleasant young lady, a former waitress, had never worked in their friendly team. Discipline suddenly rose in the hall. The regulars didn't pester the pretty Alice, and if someone tried to let go at first, the rest attacked him. Alex just chuckled approvingly, and Kate soon gave her summary. "This Alice is a smart person. Men can sense a mile away that you can't play with her, you can't joke with her." 6 months flew by unnoticed in the work and worries about clients. Alice had completely settled into the bar, deftly carrying 4-liter mugs of drunken nectar in her hands at a time. At the same time, she never became familiar with the guests of the establishment, clearly keeping them at a safe distance. The New Year holidays flew by like a comet across the starry sky. The new year has come. By the beginning of February, Alice had completely submitted her teaching practice reports. 2 state exams were behind us, and I received permission from the dean's office to write and then defend my thesis. Everyone was looking forward to the start of the Winter Olympics. It's no joke. The country won the right to welcome athletes from all continents on its lands. The most avid fans bought tickets for matches and competitions in Real Madrid in advance. The favorites' regulars couldn't wait to be spectators here at the bar. In an atmosphere of general rejoicing, mugs of beer are pushed together. It was impossible to watch the opening ceremony of the Olympic Games without intense emotions and multiple libations. The beer flowed like a river. Passions were running high. Everyone at the bar tables jumped up with cheers. It seemed that no one could sit at home that evening. The favorite was crowded. Alice barely had time to take orders and run from the bar to the customers. At the peak of noise and hubbub, the door of the bar swung open, and a new company, unfamiliar to the old-timers, burst in from the cold. Young, athletic-looking guys walked to the center in a crowd. There were still a few bath chairs empty there. Alice sighed with relief that at least their clever bartender could handle these guys on his own, and straightened a strand of brown hair that was sticking out of the ponytail gathered on the top of her head with a colored knitted elastic band. Precaria, who appeared from the back room, whispered trustingly, "If I survive this evening until closing time, consider me also an Olympic gold medalist. I don't have any strength anymore." The old cleaning lady winked at her slightly. "And look at the new ones. They don't look like the local aborigines at all. One is more beautiful than the—" "Where did such a handsome guy come to us?" Kate laughed contentedly, and Alice turned around to look at the handsome strangers. Her attention was immediately attracted by one of the strong, broad-shouldered guys. He slowly pulled beer from a tall glass with a colorful logo on the side, and carefully watched what was happening on the huge TV screen. Even from a distance, it was clear that he had dark brown eyes, almost like 2 glowing coals, and a short crew cut of dark, almost black hair. Okay, Alice thought, I've already forgotten when I paid attention to male representatives. But in a couple of months, I will only turn 21 years old. Between school and daily work, Alex never found a shift for me. I'm so soon turning into an old maid without a single sign of femininity, as if he had overheard her thoughts. The guy suddenly turned around and looked at her point blank without looking away for several seconds, smiled warmly, and only then answered the question of the guy sitting next to it. Monday, since the car stalled, it was taken to a service station. God himself ordered us to watch the opening ceremony of the Olympics here. Okay, Dennis, whatever you say. At least I warmed up a little while they waited for emergency services. The guys talked about something else more quietly and then ordered another glass of beer. The evening slowly rolled to a close. Alice's shift was ending. It wasn't the easiest, but the opening of the Olympics was worth it. Everyone was in high spirits. Alice completely forgot about the guy who had briefly attracted her attention, but somewhere in heaven, fate decreed otherwise. When the skiing competitions fell on schedule at the Olympics, he appeared in the bar again, but this time he was alone, without friends, and took a far table in the corner. With a gesture, he asked her to come over, ordered a mug of zero, as they called it, non-alcoholic beer, and a plate of nuts, croutons, and squid rings. While the skiing competition was going on, he did not take his eyes off the screen, and as he was leaving, he unexpectedly asked Alice a question. "What time do you finish work, Alice?" Her name was on her jacket. "I would like to accompany you if you don't mind." "I don't mind." For some reason, the waitress, who was already pretty tired by the end of the working day, became very embarrassed. Now she didn't care at all whether she looked worthy to communicate with a handsome man. It was surprising that the very person to whom she turned her feminine attention returned to favorites. "The shift will come to its logical conclusion in 40 minutes. I'll be waiting for you in the car at the entrance. Take it easy on your work. I'm not in a hurry." It took a minute to drive 2 blocks to her house. The night streets were already completely deserted. Only rare lanterns and the moon in the sky slightly illuminated the even rows of 5-story brick buildings and the bench at the entrance. They were silent, as if they had filled their mouths with water. The guy, only when he opened the car door for her, said dully, "I didn't have time to introduce myself. I'm Dennis. I work as a ski coach. For now, you have to watch your favorite competitions on TV. My charges are small. Their victories are yet to come." They reached the apartment, where Dennis volunteered to accompany her in complete silence. Like partisans in the forest before an important mission. "I'm not asking for coffee," said the man. "Although I wouldn't refuse a cup of this invigorating drink. Why not?" Alice easily agreed, having already had enough of loneliness when you return to the warmth of home after work. At its epicenter, there is only the quiet hum of an old refrigerator, and then the same ancient TV was turned on for company, and no one for several months now. They entered the apartment at the same time, encountering bodies on the threshold. Alice used to read in some novel that there is such a passion when sparks fly between a man and a woman. Now she saw this process in reality, and she even seemed to be shocked by an electric shock when touched. "I went to put the kettle on in the kitchen. Sorry, I'm running your house here. You don't have a face. You're so tired after all that running around in the bar." 5 minutes later, 2 large cups of steaming instant coffee were already standing on the kitchen table. Nearby there were delicious sandwiches with fresh loaf and cheese to eat. Alice ran to the store just before work to get groceries. Dennis acted as if he had been preparing dinner for the 2 of them for many years, casually and habitually. After eating, he quickly rinsed the cups over the kitchen sink and placed them in the metal drainer. Then he began to say goodbye. "Until the Olympics are over, I will meet you from work every day, and then we'll see." He was a quiet man in life and a very reliable husband, her Dennis. She had never known before what it was like to be behind an impenetrable stone wall. After meeting, they became close at lightning speed, without long courtship, sweet bouquet, special romance. He became her first and only man. Yes, it remains that way to this day. A year after they met, curly-haired George, who looked like his father, was born, and 3 years later, fidgety and hooligan Mary was born. She and Dennis had already decided that, given their now common passion for alpine skiing with their offspring, they should stop for now, and suddenly their husband passed. "How come? Just yesterday, a person hugged you, whispered tender words in your ear, lived side by side. Today, he is no more." Then, at the beginning of their family life, and then in between the births of children, Dennis and Alice spent all their free time in the mountains, either waiting for the first snow or seeing it off at the end of the season. Alice graduated from a pedagogical institute long ago, but she never had the opportunity to teach schoolchildren the rules of spelling and love of literature. At the Olympic Reserve School, where her husband worked, a vacancy became available for a teacher for a younger group of promising children who had come to their city from all over the country. Dennis's parents were doctors and epidemiologists. Mary took after their mother, blonde-haired, gray-eyed, with an outwardly calm and peaceful, a misleading impression. In fact, she was a collector of pranks, a lover of acute situations and adventures. Younger than my brother, she became rooted to skiing. People around joked that this girl was already born wearing ski boots and holding. Alice stroked the ski equipment lying on the mezzanine. My eyes stung with tears again. How ornate everything turned out then, a year ago. Stefan was born. She was on maternity leave with him again. Large, as Dennis laughed. They were once walking with a glass stroller in the park near a newsstand. The children lingered, and they liked the plastic toys on display. The talkative saleswoman even stuck her head out of the window, looking at their friendly family. And then she reached into the inner bin somewhere and pulled out a slightly tattered lottery ticket. "Young people, here I have a ticket from the instant lottery. You just need to rub the stripe and you will immediately see whether you have won or not. It's worth $1. Try your luck." Dennis and Alice laughed. "We don't believe in any of these lotteries." While they were chatting with the newspaper and magazine saleswoman, the children each chose a toy, but they were both very pleased with the purchase. They noisily rushed forward along Park Alley. Dennis said, "Stephen can't choose a gift for himself yet. The lottery is for him. Let's erase the stripe right here." Alice picked up the top layer of paper with the edge of her sharp nails, rubbed the surface, and faded blue numbers began to appear underneath. Having read what appeared on the piece of paper, she grinned and said only one word. "Oh, what's so funny?" Dennis reacted immediately. "We won $1 million. The children had already returned to the kiosk, having run all the way to the end and back. The curious owner of the paper treasures leaned out of the window. "Did you get any money? Up to $100? I can give it to you right here on the spot." "Yes, the number 100 also appears there," answered the confused Alice. "Only $1 million. No, go away." The aunt said in surprise. I immediately thought that I should have erased the stripe on this piece of paper with frayed edges that seemed so expensive. "If the win is big, you will have to go to the head office." In my memory, the largest amount was $25,000. One man here erased my ticket. He came to see me later and told me that everyone paid him according to his rank. Excited by the unexpected situation, Dennis and Alice, picking up the stroller with the sleeping Stefan and the older children, went home. There they looked again at the inscription on the ticket under a magnifying glass. There was no doubt about the numbers. Alice had to say the last weighty word on what to spend the money that had accidentally fallen and already safely received. The woman thought for a moment and then made her verdict. "Dennis, I love you very much. I am saddened by the longing for the snow-capped mountain peaks in your eyes. You and your students have already been to the resort this winter season. But I remember your dream to conquer the black slopes on Elbrus and with your wards. You cannot move further than the green and blue ones. They are all newbies, mostly. Ride the red trails a couple of times in your free time, and that's it. Adrenaline. This will not create a new melancholy. You have vacation in a week. Because of Stefan, I won't be able to keep you company. Go to Elbrus with one of the guys who are avid ski lovers." At first, Dennis was greatly puzzled by his wife's proposal, but his beloved woman was right. After suffering a serious injury 8 years ago, professional skiing in any competitive form was forever a thing of the past for him. At first, he was even thoroughly depressed by such a verdict from the doctors. Later, he was found by the management of the Olympic Reserve School in his hometown with an offer to switch to coaching. He still kept in close touch with his friends, fellow fans of the Krushi Mountains, covered with a cap of fluffy snow. He taught young boys and girls at the school. The pain from the consequences of the injury slowly subsided. He dreamed of riding at least once on a real daring ski trail. The whole family accompanied Dad to the train. Then we went to a pastry shop to buy our favorite cakes and drink tea in the evening in honor of the head of the house's vacation. Dennis always devoted so much time to his family that their joy for him was. Sometimes you need to let your husband and Dad go free skiing too. Alice then vaguely remembered the day when she received a call from the ski base on Elbrus. The Kabardians, who spoke English, spoke poorly 4 days after the arrival of Dennis and his friends. A company of young majors from among the golden elite of society appeared at the base. Young people went out to the ski slopes heavily drunk. When they announced the danger of avalanches, they just laughed in their instructor's face. "We are not afraid of anything. We went to the track and will continue to go. Today we just decided to try out your black one for the pros. We've all been skiers for years, but you're not our boss here." An elderly Kabardian, a guide instructor with many years of experience, himself a former athlete, just shouted when he heard this statement. "Do you even know how many of the same crazy people died near the Black Ski Road, as in permafrost, as in the grave? You can't even get corpses from there later. Moreover, the weather is predicted to be bad." No one listened to the words of the experienced mountain old-timer. They came down, drinking whiskey, patted each other on the shoulder, and poured out of the wooden frame into the street in a crowd. Dennis and his friends, already finishing their coffee and khachapuri at the table, exuding the aromas of fresh-baked goods, also soon rose from the table. Their plans included a short warm-up on an easy green track. Today they did not intend to drag the ski bull by the horns of danger. In the courtyard of the ski resort, everything was quiet and peaceful. A large shaggy dog was stomping around the booth, having just finished eating a sugar bone that the cook from the cafe had treated him to. Here, far from civilization, everything was different from somewhere in the Alps. Much simpler, without the frills of tourist services. It is at the foot of the two-headed giant Elbrus that guests of Kabardino-Balkaria can never be counted. And here, a little further from the village, is a place for experienced people, for our own people. An hour after breakfast, large, dense snow began to fall from the gray sky, which was beginning to frown and pout with causeless anger. Another hour later, the sky was completely clouded with black-purple clouds. The Kabardian quietly whispered something under his breath and moved his lips with annoyance. Then I couldn't stand it, dressed warmer and went towards the black ski slope. Having walked the entire way along the only trails he knew, half an hour later he stopped at the very top of the point of descent along the ski slope. On the side of the slope, he saw a flock of young people in bright red and yellow jackets. They fiddled around near the same place, then moving away, then approaching it again. The Kabardian cursed again, sensing something was wrong. His fears were not in vain. When he got to the unfortunate skiers, they vied with each other to explain to him that they had started an impromptu competition. They were descending in a line one after another, when the three guys riding in front of them, before their eyes, seemed to fall through the ground, go somewhere under the snow, as if it had never happened. I told you, I warned you that it's not good to climb onto a black branch, especially while drunk and in bad weather. There are plenty of treacherous crevices here. I'll go and call the guys who are skating on the green track. Maybe they'll say something. I'll call the rescuers at the central control post. They searched for the unlucky trio until dark the entire next day, despite the constant threat of an avalanche, but to no avail. Then the experts ended the expedition and ordered all tourists who had found shelter at a remote ski base to go down to the foot of Elbrus. It will be safer there if the snow mass accelerates at an exorbitant speed. Dennis couldn't find a place for himself and then decided to stay with the watchman. For some reason, he always blamed himself for not listening to the conversations of the major boys, for not stopping them when they were about to go to the black ski slope. A prickly cold burned inside him. It seemed that it was not other people's guys who disappeared on the damned ski track, but one of his charges from the Olympic Reserve School. He couldn't find a place for himself. He rushed about the warm interior of the log house, grabbing his skis, his boots, his cozy warm down jacket. He went to the mountain at night before dawn. What was he looking for? Who was he hoping to pull out? What snow demons were he talking to? Nobody will ever know. That night, an avalanche descended from the peaks to the foot of Elbrus. Maybe it was she who caught it with her dense snowy edge, crushed it with her mass without stopping, rushing down, walked like a skating rink, pressed it to the slope, and then ran on to destroy everything in her path. The old Kabardian watchman could not then explain to Alice, who came to pick up her husband's body, what dark force had pulled him up onto the black path. He was found 3 hours after dawn. The cook was still embarrassed to look into his room and wake him up for breakfast. And in the room, the bed was already cold. Dennis lay in the fetal position with his arms and legs oddly crossed, pulled up to his stomach, near the supposed edges of the cleft. After the autopsy, the medical examiner wrote a report that his heart stopped. Alice, after reading this document, immediately remembered the words of Friedrich Nietzsche: "If you look at an abyss for a long time, then the abyss also looks into you." All the time after that, it seemed to her that the last hours of Dennis's life were terrible. This is how, magically, he appeared in her life, unobtrusively, without unnecessary words or explanations, sharply and quickly. He also left her life without saying goodbye, without explaining anything, without looking him in the eyes. When cleaning the mezzanine somehow has a bad effect on you, it's time to feed the children and put them to bed. Luckily, Stefan isn't being capricious today. The youngest son was soon to turn 2 years old. Recently, she found something for him to do that was so captivating that he could sit quietly for hours and not make a sound. The secret was simple. She placed a pair of her cleanly washed sneakers in front of him. She pulled out the lace from one of them and left it in the other. They say that children at 2 years old are still very young, that they technically understand where to go. Stefan enthusiastically inserted the lace into his sneaker and could sit with this toy for a couple of hours in a row. The most interesting thing was that, as a result of his diligence, the lace that was inserted into the shoe with his hands looked much neater than the lace inserted by Alice. Believe it or not, after feeding the trio pancakes with cottage cheese, drinking tea with ice cream and jam, Alice ordered everyone to brush their teeth before bed and go to bed. George, who had recently started first grade, and Mary, who was already accustomed to getting up early for kindergarten, were already accustomed to discipline. Quiet Stefan fell asleep only after reading a fairy tale. She taught him this herself. After that, winnings, which were almost not spent by Dennis, they lived on child benefits for now. And Alice wasn't the worst tutor, but she couldn't take on many students, renting Dennis's one-room apartment, the renovation of which in the family has long been called a long-term construction project, could be a good help. All the years of living together with her husband, Alice kept preventing him from selling the property. She joked that it would be useful to her eldest son when he got married. "We just need to freshen up your apartment, change the furnishings in your bachelor apartment to a more comfortable one, and a family nest will be ready for our handsome boy. He is growing like in fairy tales by leaps and bounds." For some reason, Alice also wasn't in the mood to sell both apartments, hers and Dennis's, and buy something newer and more spacious. She couldn't really explain this feeling, but they lived like this for all 7 years of marriage in an old 5-story building on the outskirts. There was again no money to continue renovations at the Dennis house. The money was inexorably melting away. Once again, the question of placing the youngest in kindergarten arose urgently, but as usual, there were no places. The golden autumn outside the window rustled with fallen leaves underfoot. Today's janitors were not as diligent as Sandra. At one time, foliage was collected reluctantly into large bags. Sanitary control prohibited burning. Therefore, at first they stood in a whole army along the walls of the house, and then once a week they were taken somewhere in a garbage truck. And now there is a whole line of them lined up near the dark brickwork. It seemed to Alice that some shadow was moving at its epicenter. Just in case, she called the cat. The woman often fed mongrels with tails. She even promised her children that someday they would definitely have a pet. "Hey, I'm going to the store. I can buy you some sausage." "Wait, Fluffy." Alice almost fainted from surprise when a clear voice rang out. Thank you, of course. If you're hungry, liverwurst is good, but I love big, juicy sausages. Even if there is no place to cook them." "Who are you?" The woman called out to an unfamiliar creature. "You will be surprised, but I myself would really like to know who I really am," the girl answered. And this was just a girl, small in stature, with 2 pigtails, with slightly blind, but clearly not at all childish eyes. "Why are you walking around alone at night?" "Here on our outskirts, it is not safe. Walking around alone at night like this. I worked in a supermarket." The strange person answered ingenuously. It was not possible to steal anything on the sly. "Oh, do you live by stealing?" Alice was surprised once again. Not the most promising income. This happens extremely rarely. Just little things. If on some day you fail to earn something honestly, where do you live and with whom? He asked Alice. The answer plunged her into severe shock. Since the homeless people found me on the street, I have been living with them in a house prepared for demolition near the city station. The police know about our community, but for some reason they don't touch us. Maybe she's happy with the fact that we're at least a little under her watchful eye. I have amnesia. We have an old doctor there, also homeless. She was the one who gave me this diagnosis. She cured me after I was hit in the head from behind. I don't know who attacked me. I don't remember my name or where I lived before. The girl's trusting confession melted something in Alice's soul. She immediately asked herself a question. What would Dennis do now in her place? She knew the answer. He would try to somehow help the unfortunate victim of circumstances. For some reason, Alice was sure that there was not a drop of lies in the words of the night stranger. You know what? Let's go to the store. I need to stock up on milk and bread. And then to our home. I have 3 children. We'll be able to accommodate ourselves somehow. Oh, something is inconvenient. You do not know me at all. As a teacher of English language and literature, I cannot help but note her correctly and competently delivered speech. The girl is clearly not from the margins or from some slums, which could have brought her into the lair of the homeless. What insidious forces and people had a hand in this? In the supermarket, Alice examined her find near the bags of fallen leaves in more detail. The clothes are poor but completely clean, without holes. She looked about 20 years old. It was in the darkness that the girl seemed almost like a child. The unfortunate creature gave away a look that was not at all childish. Some life experience was visible in him, and even a living mind was visible. This inquisitive gaze of green-brown eyes was not stupid. Apparently, in that past life, this girl wore glasses. In the brightly sacred hall of the supermarket, she busily checked the expiration dates on the milk and sour cream labels. True, I asked Alice for clarification. Some dates were filled with. Then I spent a long time looking at the labels on the bread, now packed in plastic wrap, accompanied by colorful drawings, the name of the baked goods and other information. Alice was surprised again. She chose baked goods only based on freshness, appearance, and inspiration. The girl read something inquisitively until she put a sliced loaf and a loaf of whole grain flour bread into the basket. On the way out at the checkout, she did not fuss and behaved confident. It didn't seem like someone who was used to stealing and had never known other living conditions could behave this way. Where did you learn all these tricks to choose the right products? I don't know, it's like something is triggered in my head. It would be better if my memory told me the name and not how to understand bread and milk. They entered the apartment quietly. The children were sleeping peacefully. Only the lamp in the hall cast faint reflections of light on the walls. Among the homeless people, they nicknamed me Helen because you seem to find me consonant with this name. You call me that too, since you decided to invite me to visit. And yet, do not consider my request impudent. Can I take a shower with you? It was always inconvenient for me to wash in our semi-barracks behind a screen. Fetch water from a water pump around the corner, heated on the electric stove, for which we always get charged by the police. What kind of wash is this? Alice brought a large terry towel from the bedroom, gave us pajamas from her personal supplies, and showed us how to use the gas water heater. There was not a shadow of doubt in her soul that pseudo-Helen would want to take something from them, take advantage of her trust and deceive her. After the shower, the girl came to the kitchen, where Alice had already made her tea with milk and a sandwich with sausage, which her children loved so much. In the light of the orange lamp, the owner of the house changed her mind once again. Shining after the hot water, with her hair flowing over her shoulders, with a deep look in her swamp-colored eyes, Helen began to look even older. Sleep was coming to both of them, and although Alice had to get up at 7 a.m. to take her son to school and her daughter to kindergarten, she was overcome with curiosity. I wanted to ask the girl further if she remembered anything at all about her mysterious. Anne stretched out in bed sweetly, like a graceful cat. Freedom of movement, freedom of action, freedom of calls and messages on your loved one's cell phone. That nasty Angela no longer stands between them. It was necessary to name this oligarch's daughter so ornately. She, Angela, is a beloved daughter, the wife of a business partner, a successful young woman. So where is she now? It's cool that she finally came up with an idea to remove this upstart from sight. She and her beloved had been making eyes at each other since school. How upset she was when Leo was sent to study in London, at some economics academy. At graduation, they danced so languidly and tenderly to the envy of all their classmates. Rumors have already spread around the school that they are a couple, and here is such a surprise with this study abroad. Angela didn't waste any time with her studies at that moment either. Two avid business partners own shopping and entertainment centers, restaurants, and supermarkets around the city. Yes, they don't have London or New York here, but an ordinary town. But by local standards, the fortune of the owners of all this wealth is colossal in terms of the number of zeros. Such a cool business should be in good hands. So Angela, as everyone around her called her, went to university after school and graduated from the Department of Food Expertise. I learned from the appearance of sausage, cheese, chocolate, and all other goodies to almost never be mistaken about their quality. Leo returned from London, a serious, thoughtful young man. The father had already lost his hands in anticipation that after some time he would be able to transfer all the affairs to his legal heir. Angela's father was older than him, despite the opportunity to receive any treatment he wanted in the best clinics in the world. His health was getting worse and worse. He did his best to involve his daughter in the business, who turned out to be a smart and wise assistant. Once, when Leo was still studying in the UK, a serious conversation took place between the two. "Sergio, my friend, you and I have known each other for so many years. Moreover, we trust each other. How would you look at my plans for my son and your daughter? The couple would be beautiful. We would pool our capital in the name of future grandchildren. Yes, I will only be glad if everything works out for our offspring. They are not the first, nor are they the last, to seal the business with marital ties. I think that in our commercial times, it is better to enter into marriage with people in your own circle so that unnecessary surprises do not arise later." Both interlocutors did not forget about their idea, and when Leo, inspired by his academic success, returned to his hometown, the two families and the men had already discussed their plans with their wives, received full approval, and all the time they casually began to organize picnics, parties, and receptions. So, willy-nilly, Angela and Leo were forced to constantly intersect. The young people themselves were also not stupid and intellectually approve of their parents' far-reaching ideas. They, of course, did not feel great and bright love for each other, but for a marriage of convenience. Such love is not required. The main thing is that they sympathized with each other, did not experience obvious antipathy, did not keep the gun in their pockets when their loved ones communicated. The level of intelligence and development, similar interest did their job. To begin with, they went to a restaurant for lunch a couple of times, to a fashion exhibition, and a touring performance of the capital's theater. A couple of months later, Leo invited the girl to a romantic dinner where he proposed marriage to her and presented her with a stylish ring in an elegant velvet box of rich burgundy color. Today we drank to the possible future of marital happiness and decided on the date of the reception in honor of the official announcement of the engagement. Angela paid tribute and drank a couple of glasses of wine. For courage, Leo destroyed 200 grams of whiskey and then decided, "Angela, sorry for asking, but I would like to know. Have you already had experience with men?" Angela, not at all embarrassed, simply answered, "I had a 2-year student romance with a guy from a parallel group. We were 20 years old, who at this age only reads poetry and looks at the moon." I wasn't a monk in England either. I lived for 3 years with a student from another college. We both knew this was a no-strings affair. She is an educated, well-read person, a loyal comrade. But they parted without tears or both knew from the very beginning that someday this would certainly happen. After this frank conversation, it somehow happened by itself that they ended up at Angela's apartment. She had been living separately with her parents for 2 years. Leo looked questioningly into her eyes. She nodded. Both understood everything without words. You have your whole life ahead of you. It was still necessary to check whether they were suitable for each other. This night, for the two of them, did not become something transcendental, fabulous and magical. Mutual sympathy, youth, and easy interest became helpers. Even then, the girl thought that it turns out that this happens. What Leo thought, no one will ever know. But he wasn't particularly disappointed either. The reception in honor of the engagement of the two heirs, both of whom were only children in the family, was organized at the highest level in the best country restaurant. There's hundreds of guests. The sparkle of diamonds and emeralds on the ladies, expensive suits and watches on their gentlemen, representatives of the press of all stripes. From the city press to the yellow press, Anne was sitting in the beauty salon and was bored. The cue for hairstyling was still not coming. He and the girls gathered in a cafe in the city center to amaze everyone with their beauty. Over the years of Leo's studies, it has become even brighter, a sort of little femme fatale. I got bored and got married. Why such a verdict? Yes, the husband turned out to be a promising scientist, but such a nerd at heart. He sits with his snowflakes, delving into old manuscripts all day long. Where has it been seen that in the age of the internet, a person collects information from ancient manuscripts? A doll like her should be regularly brought into the world so that other men will be breathtaking with envy. And he kept repeating, darling, you will soon be able to be proud of your new surname. International recognition and fabulous fees will rain down on me. Anne wouldn't have been with him for even a month, but he was surprisingly handsome and very good, and he preferably appeared on the marital bed. He preferred to sit in libraries and then at his desk half the night. Some academy gave him a personal grant for all expenses, so he was not burdened with caring for his daily bread. It was enough to live with a young wife. Not luxurious, but not poor either. Anne dreamed of a money river, endless and deep, so that she could touch it with greedy hands and lips when she wanted to drink in wealth. Hold his material confirmations in your knees, hands with long nails, with a perfect manicure. She ran away from her learned husband as soon as she met an arrogant, young entrepreneur at a bachelorette party, wasting money left and right in a nightclub. Her husband had just rushed off to the library of a neighboring city. There they found something interesting for him, and he stayed there overnight. So she agreed to easily and simply accompany the visiting businessman to his hotel room. The night went terribly, but she did not go home empty-handed after this crumpled date. A generous but inexperienced lover gave her such a sum for a couple of hours of communication, which her husband did not give her for expenses in 6 months. He made it clear that this meeting was accidental and there would be no continuation. Anne thought deeply. She needs to find a chosen one, so that as a man, he is not much worse than his current husband, and is not constrained in funds, and is not greedy. He would be happy to care for and cherish the woman he loves. It would, undoubtedly, be better if she received the status of his legal wife, but we still have to work hard on this. In the pile of magazines lying on the nightstand in the beauty salon, something on the cover of one of them seemed painfully familiar to her. She grabbed a copy of the local tabloid press and laughed loudly for the whole room to hear, and then heatedly whispered in the ear of her friend sitting next to, "Look, the goldfish has returned from London, and I also found a girl, all in wearing glasses. But first, I need to show my first love so that I can see what a woman with a capital W should look like." Anne's insidious plans were not destined to come true immediately. The fathers decided that it would be nice if their children went on not one trip, but 2. First, they will go to the Dominican Republic with its tropical delights, plunge into the turquoise Atlantic Ocean, walk hand in hand on the velvet and white sand, and admire the local flora and fauna. And at the same time, they will get used to the idea that immediately after their return, there will be a big, luxurious wedding in the city. The position obliges, and after the wedding ceremony, you can go to a more civilized Europe for a couple of months to finally cement the resulting marriage union with your feelings. For now, they will be able to cope with affairs without the airs of a large kingdom. 5 years ago, a young promising specialist appeared in the office of the bride's father, whom the elderly businessman could not get enough of. Ben was brilliantly educated, received his honors diploma here in Boston, and was a native of their city. He gave up a career in the capital for the following reason. His elderly parents lived in his homeland. They already required constant monitoring. They themselves did not cope well, even with everyday chores. A late child is the one and only. His father and mother still found the strength to help him graduate from the lyceum and get an education, and then they immediately gave up. We sat in front of the TV all day and even almost stopped going outside. Ben was recommended by an old university friend. A rare guy. Hire him as your personal assistant. You won't regret it. The fathers decided to transfer management of the holding into the hands of their children. I have completely different plans. Sergio denied. One will not interfere with the other. No one is offering you to immediately make him the general director of the entire company. Let it spin around near you. You will see it there. The owners of the holding have long since fully trusted their deputy general director. He received this position from them a year ago. While the children were traveling and getting used to their new family life, after the wedding, Ben bore all the management burdens and coped with them. I didn't get bored until the newlyweds and Anne were in town. She perfected her appearance again and again. Secular gossip reported that the marriage of Leo and Angela was officially registered. But when could such a trivial obstacle stop her? He will be her husband. We just have to wait. Young people returned from Europe sunburned, cheerful, and rested. Both were impatient to get back. Their relationship with each other was smooth, reminiscent of friendship. There was no rush to give birth to the baby yet. We decided to postpone this important issue and prepared the meeting with Leo as a strategic operation. She found out where the young businessman goes for lunch on weekdays and put on her most stylish outfit, knowing full well that in it, and with fashionable, almost invisible makeup, she would be irresistible. The squabble between her and the waitress attracted the attention of the entire catering establishment. At that moment, when Leo just sat down at one of the tables, it played out like clockwork. She imperceptibly nudged the waitress by the arm, and now a cup of chocolate was flying onto Anne's snow-white suit. What have you done? Girl, do you even know how much such a jacket from the latest collection could cost? You won't be able to pay for it in a year with your meager salary. Leo involuntarily turned his head towards the frightening lady and was stunned by how wonderfully beautiful she was. Anne also looked in his direction, instantly stopped educating the waitress, and smiled welcomingly. Leo, is that you? A minute later, they were already sitting at the same table. Leo was amazed by the changes that had happened to his school crush. Well-groomed, regal, alluring, mysterious, not like his so calm, always even in mood, standard classic wife. A fire burned inside Anne, promising unearthly pleasure. And he fell for me. The money hunter thought predatorily. We must not miss this chance and make the most of it. But first, a little teasing. Oh, I was glad to meet you, but alas, I'm in a hurry. I have an appointment, and I also have to go home and change clothes. My suit is hopelessly ruined. Such a trifle is not worth your worries. Anne, where can I buy exactly this? Let's meet tomorrow and correct this oversight of the careless waitress. The golden carp took the bait without any doubt. Leo was also impatiently waiting for the next meeting with Anne. The conscience in Leo's soul didn't even make a sound. Ben couldn't help himself. He liked the boss's daughter. No, such a definition would not even be correct. He had loved her for a long time and hopelessly. The young woman passed him by as if by an empty place. They greeted him politely when they met and immediately forgot about his existence, with the look of a loving man. Ben noted that there was no real warmth between Angela and Leo. Dry cultural politeness, a tribute to the idea of preserving and increasing the business that was once upon a time long ago, before the start of all the marriage processes and even the engagement. Ben even had an impulse to open up to Angela to tell her about his feelings, but it was on that day that he became an accidental witness to a conversation between the bosses. Ezio then say, "Just imagine, my friend, the daughter of one of our competitors married some beggar, and her dad didn't even bat an eye. Let her choose," they say, with her heart. What sincere feelings can there be in our business? I believe that it is with such views on life that you will never build a solid business. Hearing this tirade, Ben immediately changed his mind about telling Angela something, loved her silently, to himself, not paying attention to other beauties. Although, with his courageous appearance, the entire female cohort in the team cast inviting glances. Thank God, at least no one knew about his heartfelt aspirations. They said all sorts of things about his heart being broken by some beauty. Leo and Anne were drowning in an ocean of some unearthly passion. In fact, Anne herself did not rush into the pool of all these sentimental gadgets. She set a trap. Leo never went on a date without an expensive gift. Her entire apartment was now filled with luxurious bouquets of flowers. Incredibly expensive birthday outfits appeared in the wardrobe, a small, elegant car of astronomical cost. And even with technical tuning, there was also a stunningly beautiful stole from Somalia. Leo was a generous lover, made excellent money, and had a personal bank account, the contents of which his father was not interested in. Let the boy have pocket money and acutely realize she did not want to remain in the role of the second woman in Leo's life. After all, her partner still never stayed overnight with her or in another fashionable hotel, but went to Angela, and she even suspected that he never fulfilled his marital duty at home. Angela lived in complete ignorance. My husband was always there at work, at corporate receptions, at social city events, as he should be, and how he spent his time at other times did not bother her at all. There was a secret inside Angela. After returning from Europe, already being a legal wife, she somehow found herself at work in the same elevator with the deputy general director of Ben. He stood silently, without making a sound, facing his boss's daughter, and he looked at her in such a way that she got goosebumps. I shouldn't think like that, but you can't fool yourself. If only instead of Leo, my husband, was this charismatic, charming, very smart, and always very polite man. Why did fate decide in such a way that I should continue the dynasty in my father's business and not follow my heart? On the top floor, Angela got out of the elevator and went to her office, dispelling the confusion and magic of Ben, who had so unexpectedly captivated her along the way. To be honest, she liked this young man from the very first moment they met. Remembered her father's favorite motto, "Position obliges." Angela did not forget that meeting in the elevator and pulled out these memories from the nooks and crannies of her memory when she was alone. Her father increasingly shifted business tasks onto her shoulders. They constantly crossed paths with Ben at planning meetings, but sat far from each other. Angela didn't even notice that her husband's schedule began to increasingly include overnight business trips. Their cold marriage of convenience did not bring simple human happiness to either of them. Angela couldn't even remember the last time she and her husband were intimate. At this time, Anne was preparing to give Leo an ultimatum. Either she or that nasty Angela. Leo increasingly disappeared with his mistress, sometimes for the entire week. She decided that the coming days, coinciding with the annual holiday, were just the right time to talk. Leo promised that they would fly to the resort for all 3 days under the guise of a business meeting with Southern partners. The trip to the sea turned out to be extremely romantic. There was only one thing that upset Leo. Anne didn't want to spend time in bed. Everything pulled her either to a restaurant or to a new fashionable chain cafe, where they cooked mind-blowing, even generous purchases at the local shopping and entertainment center did not make her more flexible. And the man was puzzled by her behavior, which smacked of either coldness or indifference towards night. After a hearty dinner in the most expensive restaurant at the resort, Anne laid down in bed with him, side by side, but did not let him near her, and started a conversation. "Hey, don't you think it's time for us to somehow decide on our relationship? I'm not going to spend my whole life on the sidelines as your mistress. My girl, you know what our marriage with Angela is based on. Divorce is impossible. We are the management center of a huge holding company. If he is gone, then there will be no more opportunities to pamper you like that. But what should I do in this case?" Anne asked angrily, not expecting such an obvious refusal right away. "I am the eternal number 2 in the shadow of your Angela. This won't happen." That night, for the first time, Leo was never allowed to see her. He flew home angry. Anne, sitting next to her, did not remove the mask of offended and insulted from her face. Both went home in different taxis. A week after that ill-fated trip, Anne already had a new plan ready in her head. If Angela cannot be moved, she should simply be erased from the face of the earth. She didn't even care that such ideas openly smacked of crime. Anne was still furious. Leo decided to take a time out and give his precious lover time to calm down and wisely accept his arguments. Therefore, nothing suspicious even occurred to him when his wife disappeared without returning from work one evening. Having learned that Angela, whom he devotedly loved, had disappeared, Ben could not find a place for himself and decided to conduct his own investigation. It had long seemed to him that Leo had been behaving extremely strangely in recent months. He tells his father and his partner that he will be late in the office, with documents accumulated like a snowball, and he mysteriously disappears as soon as the two companions leave for home. Unable to resist, he decided to play a homegrown private follow Leo, who, once behind the walls of the holding, didn't really hide. Ben found out that he had a mistress within a couple of days. Moreover, spying on the boss's heir turned into an obsession for Ben. He recorded the facts of Leo's adultery with pedantry and meticulousness, expensive spending on gifts, the sweet couple's trips to restaurants, trips to country clubs, dates in secluded hotels. He really wanted to collect his collection of photographs, and he took plenty of pictures of Leo and Anne from different angles in order to dump all this dirt in front of his superiors. The only thing that stopped him, he did not know the conditions under which this marriage was concluded. What was confusing was that Angela remained completely unperturbed. Having met her alone in the elevator, he tried to understand her inner state. He even scolded himself later for not taking his eyes off her, trying to shine through her like an... She was absolutely the same calm girl as usual. She did not at all resemble a woman suffering from her husband's treacherous infidelities. The last straw in Ben's patience with Leo's bad behavior was the disappearance of Angela. Everyone in the office saw that the young woman took her bag in the evening and hurried to the exit of the parking lot, got into her car and drove away. Angela did not show up at home that day. Leo sounded the alarm only the next day. Just that evening, when his wife disappeared somewhere, as if through the earth, he went on a date. The mistress again turned into a wax cat, looked devotedly into her eyes, and insisted that she understood everything and agreed to everything as long as her beloved was near. The day after the mysterious disappearance of his daughter, the businessman had no time for jokes. He loved her madly, although he tried not to show it to anyone. The entire security service of the holding company was raised to its feet. The police joined in, and the father involved private detectives he knew, to no avail. All city and regional hospitals and morgues have already been checked. Sergio's people with Angela's photo looked through all the unidentified female corpses. A week later, on a short walk near the park, they found Angela's car with a bag lying forlornly in the backseat. To everyone's surprise, no barbarity was committed against this property. Sergio was going crazy, and Ben was tossing between duty to his boss and internal doubts, all the time asking himself, how will I show Sergio a photo of his son-in-law with his mistress? This will also lead to a quarrel between longtime business partners and a split in a huge company. And yet Ben decided, I came to the boss's office on weak legs. He would most likely lose his place in the holding. He didn't care as long as Angela was found. May she only be alive and well. There was a decisive knock on the door. I immediately saw that the boss had lost a lot of weight and had lost a lot of weight in recent days. Oh, what do you want, Ben? I have no time for work right now. I think you should see this. Ben fanned out all the pictures he had taken while following Leo's movements on the table. The businessman picked up the incriminating evidence against his son-in-law, went through all the photographs one by one, becoming darker than a cloud. I have a feeling that Angela's disappearance is somehow connected with this woman, Ben added. Why did you start all this surveillance? Did they dig under their bosses, wanted to dig up something exclusive and ruin our reputation? I love your daughter. I didn't dig or look for anything. I just want her to be happy. For some time now, Leo's behavior began to make me suspicious. So I rushed to find out what and how. You can fire me now. Why didn't they come to me with all this abomination earlier? Angela seemed completely serene to me. I did not consider it possible to disturb her peace. The man once again looked at Ben from under his brows, then pressed the button to call the secretary. The head of the security service come to me and tell Oliver that I would like to see him in my office. Ben was taken aback. Previously, the younger Sergio always went to his partner himself when he had questions, and all corporate meetings always took place in the meeting room next to Oliver's office. You can be free, Ben. I will inform you additionally about my decision regarding your non-work initiative. The conversation between the two oldest partners was difficult. But first, Sergio showed Oliver all the photos of Ben's work. Without saying where he got these materials from, he asked directly, "Did you know that your son is recklessly having an affair with his mistress?" "Oh, no, this was unknown to me. If I had known, I would have tried to stop this disgrace." The head of the security service knocked on the door. The men focused on developing a search plan for Angela due to newly discovered circumstances. Anne was carefree drinking coffee and chatting with a friend on the phone when someone knocked on the door of her apartment. She stretched sweetly, smelled the silk robe, and coquettishly asked, "Darling, is this how you decided to joke? You have a key, don't you? Open up, and Leo sent us to you." The woman instantly opened the door. Two hefty guys with either military or athletic bearing burst into the apartment. One of them asked sharply, "Where is Angela? We warn you that the next person to knock on your door will be the police." Anne batted her eyelashes indignantly. "I don't know who Angela is. It's some kind of mistake." The second of the uninvited guests dumped photographs on the coffee table in front of her. "We will still prove that you have something to do with her disappearance. And then you will face a much more serious article of the criminal code than now." In 1 minute, the beauty Anne, hiding her face in horror, turned into a pitiful semblance of a femme fatale. She began to speak awkwardly. "I only asked the guys at the bar to intimidate her. But these idiots overdid it and hit me on the head from behind with something heavy. When I gave them money for the work, they said they were confused. They took her by the arms to the waiting room at the station and sat her down on an empty chair. After the injury, she did not lose consciousness, but she became somewhat lethargic and strange. The guys showed her the phone, on which they recorded the entire conversation and her confession. "It's better for you to come to the police yourself and confess as the customer. If Angela's father takes care of you, everything will be much worse." Further searches went easier. The holding security service turned the entire station upside down and came to the lair of the homeless. When they saw Helen's photo, they didn't refuse. "Yes, we found such a young lady at the station," and dragged her to us. The doctor, Baba Zoe, nursed the girl and treated her as best she could. But she never remembered who she was. Then everyone en masse taught a new craft, how not to get lost in a big city. They took the clothes, lost the expensive ones, and sold them at the clothing market. Watches and jewelry also went there. Helen didn't have her phone with her. Apparently, those who hit it on the head took the expensive toy. A few days ago, she did not return to spend the night from the fishery, where she usually worked part-time. So I sorted out vegetables and fruits by weight in the back room of supermarkets. There is such activity that is temporary. If you look decent, they can trust you. The holdings employees went to all the places where homeless people sometimes try to earn at least a little money honestly. In 2 places, they immediately recognized Angela, and in one store the employee at the checkout said, "I know this girl. She's always so polite and cultured. She often buys groceries from us. Sometimes she comes alone, sometimes with an older woman, or with younger brothers and sister." The servicemen were surprised. "Maybe this is not our Angela. They all live in that 5-story house. We just won't name the apartment. You can ask the grannies in the yard." The cashier asked after them. Alice could not get enough of the fact that one dark autumn night she met Helen in the courtyard of the house. The girl turned out to be a golden assistant, clearly well-educated and well-read. She perfectly found a common language with the children, who listened to all her stories with their mouths open in delight. Stephen was hugging Helen by the side of her leg and did not want to let her go. Alice could now safely leave home to work with her students. The academic year was gaining momentum. Many school children limped in English language and literature. There was no shortage of clients. Alice went to the supermarket to buy some cakes. Today, Helen and the children will have a sweet party with some interesting film. The cashier at the exit looked at her strangely, as if she wanted to say something, and then remained silent. Alice thought that she must have smudged her mascara when she rubbed her eye with her fist. The road to their entrance was blocked by a motorcade of expensive cars. Entirely elite foreign cars, hefty, with shiny mother-of-pearl sides. Men in formal suits, white shirts, and ties stood near the cars. One of them was clearly very nervous. Ben asked to go with the security service to the place where Angela was supposedly now located, so pitifully that the heart of the stern businessman trembled. "But let me be there without any tricks." Sergio recently came up with the idea that he and Oliver were mistaken with their strategy of a marriage of convenience between the children of two high-ranking families. Leo, after his affair was discovered, was hanging out under the police station where his mistress was in custody. Ben, on the contrary, did not go home until the security service brought new news to the chief in the evenings about how the search for Angela was progressing. You cannot command your heart to love. It is beyond the control of human will. Alice walked towards her apartment as if through a gauntlet, but stopped when she heard her neighbor's voice. "Yes, there she is. It's the girl you're looking for who's staying in her house right now. So, who is it that all these expensive Jeeps with tinted windows are after?" So I knew that our Helen was a difficult girl. "Look what a retinue has appeared." She turned to the men and said, "One person will go with me. You scare children with this command. Can I go?" The same handsome man who seemed to be the most nervous stepped forward. The head of the security service grinned. "Well, go ahead, Mr. Deputy General Director. Maybe you will be of more use." Helen opened the door and saw an unfamiliar man behind Alice. He rushed towards her and grabbed her in his arm. "My God. Angela, are you alive? How glad I am to see you. We all almost went crazy when you disappeared." A click in the head, a short flash, a silver elevator with a stylish design. There are two people in the office, a man and a woman, and the woman feels so good that this man is nearby. Angela remembered who she was, how they parked the car near the kiosk to buy a bottle of cool mineral water, how someone quietly approached from behind, as if sneak, and then pain and failure. Angela stepped towards Ben and hugged his strong shoulders. "Oh, I'm glad to see you too, Ben. I am very happy." After the mysterious story of Angela's disappearance, drastic changes took place in the city's richest holding company. Sergio, who experienced the recent events very hard, completely handed over the reins of the company to his partner, Mr. Oliver. "I even sold him my stake. They say at a reduced cost as compensation for moral damage. You won't understand them, the rich." Oliver's son, Leo, lives in a town next to the colony where his mistress, Anne, is serving her sentence. He started drinking. Recently, he was even seen hanging out with two local alcoholic celebrities, Henry and Alec. Anne herself does not react to her beloved's feat. She is having an affair with one of the prison workers. Why does she need Leo? Now we need to look for a more profitable option for ourselves. Sergio did his best for his daughter. Anne will have to stay in a correctional facility for another 6 long years. Ben and Angela recently got married and set off to conquer Korea with its beauty. No luxury hotels, a tent, a fire, soup in a pot, tea with berries and a truly loved one nearby. Here it is, happiness. Sergio became involved in charity work. The first creation was a school for talented children from disadvantaged families. The director of the school is now English and literature teacher Alice Johnson. Her youngest son, Stefan, learned to read early. He sits for hours in his mother's library at work. Recently, Alice took away a volume of Maupassant from him with the words, "It's too early for you to read, my young admirer of good literature." Alice herself has not yet found a man after her heart. There is no equal to Dennis, and therefore it is better to be alone than with just anyone. Everyone learned their own lessons from the fact that fate once confronted them in this world. Everyone drew their own conclusions from what happened. Life is a motley thing.
It was dark outside the windows and another heavy, full of thoughts. Night was coming. Alexander couldn't sleep. He kept tossing and turning in one place. He would lie on his back or turn over on his side. It seemed to him that from the garage heard a suspicious noise and shouting. Well, I'm in trouble. It was necessary to get so hid. If my wife didn't find out, she'd file for divorce immediately. She'll say that I've got a brother. The zeros are over. Hey, it's too late to change anything. If you're already on the slippery slope, get out of it as best you can. The main thing is not to shine before the time. His wife turned to Alexander and hugged him by the shoulders. Alexandra, why are you sleeping? Insomnia again. Take sleeping pills so you'll fall asleep faster. Angelica, sleep. Everything is fine. It's just been a hard day. You know me, your Alexandra will always think of something to occupy your brain at night." The woman sighed and kissed her husband on the cheek. She turned on her side and was soon snoozing peacefully. "My darling, if you knew what I've done, you'd probably be packing your things right now," Alexander thought tiredly. He tried, but in vain. His head stubbornly refused to relax. The old man got up, put on his robe, and tiptoed out of the bedroom. There was an ominous, suspicious silence in the house. The man stepped out of the house and froze, listened. The moon shimmered dimly. Not a single rustle. I wondered if it seemed so. "I'll check anyway," Alexander said to himself. Nature seemed to have frozen in expectation of sudden changes. The old man stood for a while at the door of his own garage. His frowning face was illuminated by the glare of the moon. From this mysterious light, falling at a peculiar angle, Alexander's appearance was truly menacing and even mystical. Nature seemed to be frozen in anticipation of something sinister. Alexander stood for a moment at the door of his own garage. A moment more, and he pulled the handle decisively. The room was warm. The owner liked to spend a lot of time in the garage, repairing his car, so the man even installed gas heating, so as not to freeze. Ford, the love and pride of Alexander's entire life, stood in complete darkness. The round headlights reflected the light of the moon peeking from behind the half-open door. The man touched the car with great tenderness, cold, but ready to start at any moment. Just like an angry woman, he touched the trunk, leaned into it, and whispered, "Be patient for a while. I'll let you out soon. Just sit quietly. There are plenty of ravines around. No one will notice your disappearance." Alexander was born in the forgotten town of Kizlyar, California. His mother, Selena, was Afro-American, his father a true Dag, living according to all the canons of Islam. At first, the young lived soul to soul. But when the children were born, things took a turn for the worse. Alexander's father worked practically round the clock, and when he came home, his mother was badly beaten for any trifles. She served food to the table in a wrong way or did not do a good job in bed. Alexander, like his mother, did not like the presence of his father at home. The boy, hearing the sound of heavy work boots outside the door, pulled his head intensely into his shoulders, waiting with fear for the next scandal. The father never pitied, neither the children nor the mother. Therefore, the image of the most kind-hearted man who believed in the justice of the laws of the Koran sank into memory, hidden behind an incomprehensible haze. Alexander's sisters, Olivia and Katie, unconditionally followed all the instructions of the strict head of the family. They were terrified of cruel punishments. The day came when their mother could no longer tolerate their father's behavior. But how to escape? Where to? The parents are far away in the United States, and leaving is an impossible mission. A woman in this country has no rights, no liberties. The first time the mother and children tried to run away from home, when the father once again went to work. The documents of his wife and children were well hidden by a calculating man, but he did not even guess that the mother has long known about the stash and waits for the moment to leave quietly. The woman gathered the most necessary things, found the stash of documents, and ran out of the house. A cab was waiting for her at the gate. Selena decided to get as far away as she could. Next, she would find a hostel and settle in. Then, she would go to the embassy to legally leave the city. But everything went wrong. The neighbors, seeing that the mother and her children were leaving in a hurry by car, immediately called Hazem. The neighbors saw the mother and children leaving in a hurry in a car and immediately called Hazem. But no one was there. Hazem gathered his friends and neighbors of the men and asked about the car and the driver who had witnessed the family's escape. A few hours later, the man found his wife and children near one of the inexpensive hostels. Hazem took the unwanted with the children home and put them under lock and key. Now the mother had no right to see the children. The man hired a housekeeper, an old fat woman who smelled bad. The housekeeper had to clean the house, cook food, look after his wife and children, carry water and food to them. What was going on in Selena's soul at that time was hard to describe. Now she was deprived of everything: the opportunity to go to her homeland, to see her father and mother, to raise her children in love and respect. What will they see in this hole? I should have listened to my mother. She was right. A hot temper is not always an indicator of love, thought the woman, wiping tears from her face. A few years passed. Hazem again allowed the woman to move around the house. but the housekeeper remained. The woman knew that the old woman was looking after the family. Now to escape, one had to be more cunning. The mother had to gain her husband's trust, do as he told her, to fulfill his every whim. It was very difficult. The man was a tyrant. He liked to abuse his wife. But the mother, who wanted to leave the walls of the house as soon as possible, tolerated and obeyed. The children knew everything and listened to their mother. Only Alexander was contradictory. He refused to spend time with his father, did not accept toys from him. The man was very angry. "Alexander, well, be patient a little. Soon we will leave," whispered his mother, hugging the child. "You just need to obey your father, and he'll be kinder." "Mom, I can't see him beating you. How he bullied you. Why can't we just call the police? They'll put him in jail and we'll be gone." "Baby, if only it were that simple. Only in fairy tales there's a magic carpet airplane, a good witch who helps people. In the regular world, you have to fight for everything. You're a fighter, aren't you? Look, your sisters listen to me, and your father stopped watching them a long time ago. And your bad behavior and unwillingness to talk to him only draws your father's attention. Be nicer to him, even if you have to smile." "Mom, I will do everything as you want," uttered boy. "But when I grow up, I will fight by my own rules. No one will hurt my family. Lord, give a real childhood to my children. Let my husband forget about us for at least a minute and we'll run away," prayed the kneeling woman. The police in California could not help the mother in such a delicate situation. It was her own fault. She had to please her husband, not contradict him. Neighbors also did not want to interfere in the showdown. They had enough to do. The American woman was left alone with her heavy burden. Help came from where she didn't expect it. One day, the old housekeeper Betty beckoned the woman to her. She didn't speak English well, but her mother could understand her. "It's time for you to run away. Your parents went to the embassy in your country, but they couldn't help them. They said you have to go to the California Department of Corrections and prove that your husband is torturing you and the children. Then you can leave." "Betty, but how did you find out about all this? Why are you telling me all this?" The woman winked. "I was paid well by a handsome man. He's been asking about you. He looked like a real American, dressed like an American. I won't give you away. Don't be afraid," the old woman said hastily when she saw the woman's frightened look, "so that you can leave quickly. I'll back you up. Distract the master if necessary." "Thank you, Betty." The young woman was overjoyed. There was a ray of light ahead. Not all was lost. The main thing is to get to the department unharmed, and there she will not be allowed to offend. The days flew by. The woman waited stubbornly for the moment when Betty would say she could leave. Selena lay on the low divan. Haysom had left for work an hour ago. They had had another argument. The man had said he would have a serious talk with her when he returned. Selena knew what he meant. A severe beating was unavoidable. The children sat quietly in their room. There was a rustling in the doorway. The woman stood up and quickly opened the door. "It's time for you and the kids to go. I'll take you out through the backyard so the neighbors won't tell your husband." "Betty, what a joy. But what about you? They'll kill you." "Don't worry. I'll walk you out and I'll be out of the house in no time. He won't find me. I'll be taken care of." Little Alexandra overheard his mother and the housekeeper talking. He went back to his room and said to his sisters, "Time to pack. Remember where your bags are. Grab them and wait by the door." Alexander felt a sudden rush of courage and responsibility for Olivia and Katie's lives. Meanwhile, the mother gathered the bags. Beatty gave her their papers. "Where did you find them?" Selena asked, deeply surprised. Haysom had hidden them. "Thank you, kind woman. I will never forget what you did." They embraced. Selena was crying with joy. "All right, mistress, we can't wait. Take the children and let's go. He's been waiting for you for a long time." "Who is he, this kind soul? How did he find me?" thought the woman with interest as she and the children ran across the yard to the back exit. At the gate stood an old dirty car of an obscure model. A tall Afro-American man was waiting for them. "Let's go. All questions later." The woman put the children in the car and looked at Betty. She stood 2 steps away and smiled. "Betty, run now. God forbid anyone should see you." The housekeeper sighed heavily and walked back into the house. Her heavy footsteps could already be heard on the porch. Selena looked at her. She didn't even know then that this was the last time she would see Betty alive. The man got behind the wheel, quickly started the car, and they raced along the narrow roads of Kiziar. Tell me, Selena, how did you get into the clutches of this animal? Didn't you see where he came from and what customs his people had? All you women are fools. First, you marry foreigners. Then you look for a place to escape from this beast. Muslims are strict. It's not like the US. It's good that your parents told me. Asked me to help you. Tell me, who are you? The man started talking. I'm a volunteer. I work with people like you. I help them get justice, help them avoid death at the hands of a Muslim tyrant. I'm new to California. Your father and mother contacted me. I don't know where they found my phone number, but I decided I had to go before the worst happened. The girls in the back seat fearfully squeezed each other, and Alexander listened attentively to the conversation of adults. Of course, he did not quite understand a lot of things, but the main idea caught them saved. The boy was not at all sorry for his father. The child for his short life has not seen anything good from the man, except for the demands, humiliation of his mother. I am very grateful to you, the mother said with warmth in her voice. I can't even convey my joy. I once tried to run away from my husband, but it didn't work. Now we will come to the department, the volunteer reassured her, and you will tell us how everything happened in the family. The children should be with you. Their testimony is also very valuable. If everything goes well, you'll be divorced even without the presence of your husband. Can you tell me your name? Selena asked. Evan is the easiest name to understand. Evan. Evan, I'll find you when you get back to the US. Thank you so much. As the man dropped off the mother and children in the courtyard of a large white building, Selena sighed with relief. Now she could not be afraid. People who are loyal to wives work here. A week passed. Selena successfully ended her marriage to Hazem. The man found out that his wife was hiding in the department, and he even got them to let him in to see his disreputable wife. But Selena knew how it would end and refused to see the man, citing that he could cause irreparable harm to her children. Hazem harbored a grudge against her. Finally, the day came when the woman and her children were able to leave California and return to their native country. All the necessary documents were ready. But when Selena was walking, practically running with her children, accompanied by Evan the volunteer and several other representatives of the United States in California, to the airplane ramp, disaster struck. From the direction of the department's back exit, sharp gunshots suddenly rang out. Olivia and Katie immediately fell to the ground. Alexander and Selena were covered by Ivan. His chest was quickly covered with bloodstains. Get to the plane. You can't save your daughters, save your son. Selena, howling with pain and grief, grabbed Alexander and ran into the airplane. Behind her back, the volunteer who had saved innocent lives twice screamed hoarsely in pain. As the plane took off, through a veil of unceasing tears, Selena saw through the porthole as the local police in full uniform ran onto the takeoff pad. They had taken her ex-husband in a ring and had pulled the man to the ground. The woman looked painfully at the bloody bodies of the girls, but they didn't move. Even froze too. I'm sorry, I didn't keep you safe, Selena sobbed, when the plane had already gained altitude and the whole bloody picture disappeared from sight. Little Alexander didn't cry. He huddled in the corner of his chair and stared at one point. On his table was the standard meal of porridge, a piece of bread, an apple, and a fresh cherry. It was the cherry that looked very much like the drops of blood on the sister's cheeks. I didn't feel like eating at all. Sonny, my darling, Celine whispered, I'm sorry. I didn't keep you all safe. The woman pressed the boy with force, as if she was afraid that now he would fall to the ground from the airplane. Russia met the fugitives with bright sunshine and warmth. Spring was in full swing. Selena looked with pleasure at the native expanses, which she had not seen for a long time. Far below were birch groves. Green fields, and such green had never been, all yellow wastelands and burdocks. When the plane landed, the woman exhaled. That's it, you can no longer be afraid of anything. Her parents ran to the gangway, her mother crying and her father ruffled. Such dear faces. Hazem had prevented the woman from communicating with her parents even over the internet. The first meeting after a long separation was overwhelmingly joyful, full of tears. Where are the girls? Selena asked the mother. She only shook her head and burst into tears. Hazem. He killed them, Alexandra said slowly. He stood with his fists clenched tightly. His gaze read determination, anger, and even rage. He had taken from his father everything a man needed, a hot-hearted, brave man. His life was just beginning. The most interesting things awaited the boy ahead. Hey, Alexander, take it easy, shouted John impetuously. The old man stood near the house and watched how the guy sharply accelerates, then just as sharply reduces speed. "Stop," I say. John couldn't stand it any longer and followed the dust cloud. "I shouldn't have taught him. He's gone completely off the rails, grandson." Alexander saw nothing in front of him. He flew like a bird, slightly twisting the steering wheel on the turns. It seemed to him that in a moment he would take off. He just had to clamp the gas pedal tighter. His grandfather was running behind him and waving his fists. "Now, grandfather!" Alexander shouted through the window and pressed the gas pedal even harder. He drove into the field and raced straight down the dusty road. There was nothing to breathe in the car, so he had to close the windows. Alexander drove up to a shallow lake and stopped the car. The water beckoned to its depths. The guy quickly undressed and dived into the coolness. How good it felt! Alexander dived again and again, reached the bottom with his hands, scaring small fish. Having swum to his heart's content, the guy got out of the water and shook himself like a big dog. It was wildly hot, but it was cool near the lake. Alexander liked this place. Few people came here, too far from the village. The guy let the sun dry his skin and brown it a little, then quickly got in the car and drove back. Now my grandfather will give me a task. Alexander smiled to himself. More than 10 years had passed since little Alexander had set foot on American soil, having escaped from Kizyar with his mother. The boy was very much worried, cried all the time. He had the same nightmare every night. He looks at his dead sisters and his mother calls him to the plane. Selena had to find a good psychiatrist for Alexander. Long months of rehabilitation of the boy gave their fruits. Alexander became much easier, and time a little tightened the fresh wounds of memory. Alexander's mother traveled more than once to Washington, D.C., to the California embassy. She wanted to know how her daughters were buried, what happened to her ex-husband, and what was the fate of Even the volunteer. She learned from the rulers that Olivia and Katie were buried by neighbors with full honors in the local cemetery. Hazem was sentenced to life in prison for killing his daughters and Beatty, the family's housekeeper. Even the volunteer survived and was now rehabilitating after being wounded in Washington, D.C. Selena even traveled to the capital to visit the guy who saved her life. There they had an affair, but the woman was in no hurry to go home to please her parents. She fell through the ground. Alexander's grandparents desperately tried to find Selena, but then in Soviet times, investigations into the disappearance of people were conducted for a very long time and often did not bring any results. Alexander at first was very grieving for his mother. You bet, the boy had witnessed the murder of his siblings, lost his father, and now his mother. No. His mother abandoned him, left him and went to another man. The search for his mother has not yielded any results. The militia has been throwing up their hands. If she left with the man she loved, it means that she had her reasons. Selena's father and mother grieved very much, but there was nothing to do. They had to bring up their grandson. He was left an orphan with living parents. It is probably impossible to describe in words how difficult it was for John and Leslie. The boy had to dress and eat well. His grandfather had to find part-time work, and his grandmother adapted to bake cakes and pastries to order. That's how they lived. Selena did not make herself known. Alexander began to gradually forget about his mother. He quickly grew up and more resembled his father. Black curls, brown eyes, dark skin, and sharp temper. As a teenager, the boy often got into fights. Not even because he had been wronged. He didn't like injustice and often defended the weak. Leslie, once again visiting the principal's office, listened to a whole lecture that her grandson is a real street kid. He steals money from school children, fights, skips lessons. Alexandra, in turn, at home swore that all this is a pure lie. One day the phone rang in Leslie's room. The woman quickly picked up the phone. "Hello, who is it?" There was a rustling and sobbing sound in the receiver. "Mommy, hello. It's me." Leslie froze in surprise. She had never hoped that she would ever hear her daughter's voice. "Selena, are you okay? Where are you?" "Mom, I'm fine. I'm with Even. We're expecting a baby." Joy was quickly replaced by anger. "So you left us Alexander, abandoned him, and decided to start a new family." The woman yelled, furious. "Mom, you listen to me." "No, you listen to me. Your father and I worked day and night to feed Alexander, and you haven't even sent him a birthday card once. Do you realize that Alexander calls us Mom and Dad? He's completely forgotten you." "Mommy," Selena on the other end of the line burst into tears. Alexandra looks so much like Hasten. I can't look at him. It brings back memories of all the abuse from my ex-husband. Mommy, I'll make up for it when we get back on our feet with Vanya, and I'll send you some money. You know what Leslie said in a murderously quiet voice. We don't need your money. We should have taken care of it earlier. I won't tell Alexander anything about your call. Let the boy grow up peacefully knowing that you just vanished into thin air. Don't call here again. You're not our daughter now. Leslie hung up the phone with a bang and burst into tears. What's wrong, Grandma? A disheveled grandson came running into the room. He just woke up. Nothing, Alexander. It happens to me, quietly said Leslie, and with great tenderness pressed his grandson to himself. Adults are such strange people. Sometimes to get rid of problems, we need to cry. Alexandra, not understanding what the grandmother is saying, just silently pressed against her, the most dear person. Oh, you scoundrel, yelled John, holding onto his heart. Who authorized you, you little brat, to go so far away? Tell me. Alexander got out of the Ford and laughed merrily. Grandpa, you've been teaching me to drive for almost 3 years. I know your car like the back of my hand. Why are you yelling? I'll show you how to fly on the road. You don't even look around, you insolent bastard. What if you'd hit someone? Grandpa, I did everything very carefully and adjusted the mirrors. What's the matter with you really? Alexander carefully hugged John. He grumbled for a long time, but the old man's heart thawed a little. Let's go wash her now. You see how grimy she is, the grandfather mumbled with his toothless mouth. Alexander nodded in agreement. They got into the Ford and drove into the yard. A water fountain was bouncing merrily. The drops of water, passing through the sunlight, shimmered with all the colors of the rainbow. Alexander ran with a rag and washed the car windows. The 1972 model year was John's main pride. His grandfather had been saving up for a car for a long time. He wanted to buy a Ford, but he had to spend part of his financial reserves on Alexander, and there was no money for the third member of the family. John, not thinking long, got on an electric train and went to the capital. From there he returned happy, turning the steering wheel of a new Ford. Leslie only waved her hands. She had expected her husband to buy something larger, with additional passenger seats. Wife, come on, get in. You will ride next to me, the old man said with pride in his voice. He was glowing with happiness. Leslie shrugged and tried to sit on the seat. She did not succeed the first time, but the woman was quite sturdy. Come on, John, I'll sit in the back. What? Are you afraid? The old man laughed. It's all right, you can relax with me. Alexander, come here, you're coming with us. Ford pleasantly rumbled, and the happy family left on the first trip on 4 wheels around the village. Rode to a shine, the car shone like a precious stone. Neighbors, hearing the roar of the Ford, ran out into the street. Some watched with fear as John turned the car sharply, while others whistled with delight. Alexandra, proud as a peacock, looked out of the open window. Only rich people had cars in the village, but John glowed as if he too had been polished to a shine. Leslie gave a deafening gasp as the car bounced on the big bumps. The woman had never driven a car like this. It flies like a dragonfly, she marveled. That's right, wife. Now we can go wherever we want. Where do you want to go? Let's go to Washington, smiled the wife. I was there only once. When? So no. John interrupted her. No, Washington first. We go on a camping trip. Alexander, are you with us? Alexander nodded happily. He had enjoyed the ride in the automobile terribly. Now the boy dreamed that they would all go together to the end of the world, to the sea. John snorted and washed himself under the jets of water. Grandfather, give the polish, Alexander called. The guy stood all wet with a rag in his hands. In a moment, I'll fly, the old man squawked and went into the barn. Meanwhile, behind the fence someone called the guy. Alexander looked outside the gate. Harry. Hi. What, you were racing through the fields again? A friend smiled broadly. Come on, let's go for a walk. Come on. But I just need a little help with my grandfather's car. Harry jumped over the hedge. The friends quickly got on with the simple job. Don't do any tricks, John whispered to his grandson, so we don't have to pick you up from the children's police station again. Grandpa, everything will be fine, said Alexander cheerfully. He changed his clothes and headed to the center of the village, discussing with a friend the news of the day. Listen, your Angelica is going to go to the pedagogical university, Harry whispered worriedly. Alexander made a disgruntled grimace. Angelica Sokolnikova, Alexander's girlfriend, was planning to enter the Moscow Food Technical School. Why the new plans? I'll go talk to her. What's the joke? The guy was genuinely surprised. Well, that's why I came to you, whispered Harry. She's with the girls on the climb. I decided to tell you the whole truth about your beloved. Shall we go together? I have to talk to her myself. Alexander stopped the curious boy. Understood, Harry grumbled. They said their goodbyes, and Alexander headed towards the climb. From there, a deafening girlish laughter could already be heard. Angelica, look, yours is coming, Marina yelled. Angelica was sitting with her back to Alexander. She turned around and happily waved her hands. Alexander, and I was just going to you. I can already guess why, Alexander said grudgingly. The hot blood of his father played in him. Alexander, what are you doing? The girl raised her eyebrows in surprise. Let's go, let's talk. Alexander dragged her by the hand. Let go, it hurts me. Angelica shrieked. Alexander came to his senses a little. The girl's shout stopped her. The guy stood for a second, then turned around and went home. Stop! Why did you come? Angelica shouted. Nonsense, Alexander muttered, without turning around. Well, go away. It sounded behind me. I was going to leave you anyway. You're too hot-tempered. We can't be together. Alexander went even faster. Angelica's words cut with a knife. What a fool I am. I trusted her and she was just mocking me. Well, so be it. Let her go wherever she wants. I wanted to howl with anger, to go back, to say something hurtful. But the guy knew too well his temper would get him into trouble. Several months passed. The young people from the village left for their studies. Alexander was also going on the road. He successfully entered where he wanted. The capital kindly opened to him the road to a great future. Angelica never came to see him off. Apparently, the girl was afraid to show her face. Washington kindly opened her arms to the boy. 10 years passed. Alexander rarely appeared in the settlement. Old people only occasionally received his letters. It was the dashing 90s. Everyone earned as much as they could. Money was critically lacking, but John sent the last penny to his grandson. He knew how hard it was in the capital. And what was his surprise when the grandfather received from his grandson a weighty package with a letter. There was money in the bag. My dear grandparents, I am writing to you with great love. I am doing well. I found a great job. I've moved into a rented apartment. I'm sending you money so that you don't need anything. By the way, Angelica from our village has moved in with me. We're together now. Grandpa, buy new spare parts. That should be enough money. I want your swallow to serve you for a long time. Grandpa, you should buy a new dress or a scarf. I'll help you every month with money. Don't worry, I'm fine. Your beloved Alexander. Wife, shouted the grandfather. Come here. What's going on? The old woman fussed. She was baking pies in the kitchen and came running into John's room, covered with flour and dough. I'll wipe my hands. Did your grandson write a letter? He did. The old man threw a stack of bills on the bed. Oh my God, Leslie begged. So he must have joined some criminal group, you naughty boy. I've seen a lot of that on TV in big cities. Oh my God. The old woman clasped her hands in mute prayer. So grandmother, don't be so hot. Maybe he really found a job. Pack your things, let's go to visit him. I'm feeling a little uneasy. Leslie fussed and pulled out a large suitcase, and John went into the yard to tidy up the fort before the long journey. The old people were right. Alexander at that moment roofed peddlers at the market and beat out of them money for safety, and his Angelica got the rarest collections of clothes, jeans, suits, foreign jackets. The guy got into the grouping not by accident. One of his friends offered to earn good money. As they say, if you have entered back, there is no way back. Alexander realized that the case is bad, smells of crime, but there was no turning back. Criminal authority nicknamed Shram kept all his subordinates at gunpoint. He knew where the guy's parents lived, and in any case he could raid there and make a mess. Alexander tried to hide from Scar, but he found the guy and gave him the last chance to correct himself. When extra money began to appear, the guy decided to help his relatives. But so he once again slept in front of his grandfather and grandmother. John and Leslie never made it to Washington. They died on the highway when they collided with a truck. The grandfather gave his soul to God at once, and the old lady died in the intensive care unit from blood loss. Alexander learned about this terrible accident only after a few days. Hospital workers could not find relatives for a long time. The guy buried his grandfather and grandmother in the village with all honors. A little wrinkled guy decided to restore Shram, kindly offered the services of his service station. "And you need to fix such a bunkin," he said in surprise. When Alexander brought the car on a tow truck, "I'll bring you a foreign car from the Baltics. Do you want it? This is a memory of my grandfather. He was instead of my father," Alexander muttered, and tears came to his eyes. "I'm sorry, brother, for touching the notes of your soul. I didn't mean to." Scar, though he was a bouncer in a gang, could sympathize sometimes. "Listen, why don't we give your Ford a little makeover? New wheels and rims, repainted, tinted, and the interior could use a makeover. We'll put in a new stereo so it'll kick ass. Eh? Let's do it." "It's a good idea," the guy agreed. Suddenly, his cell phone rang in his pocket. "I'm listening," said Alexander. There was dead silence in the receiver. Then something clicked and a sob was heard. "Sonny, I'm sorry to bother you." "You have the wrong number," the guy mumbled and wanted to press off. "No, please," pleaded the woman. "I took your phone number from a nurse. When you were wounded in the hospital, I worked there as a nurse. I recognized you right away. I'm sorry I didn't come up to you and say hello. I was right next to you when you were discharged. I didn't dare. I couldn't. And now I'm dying. It's a boomerang, and I've had a bad life. Your grandparents are probably looking after you, aren't they?" "They're dead," Alexander hissed angrily. "Who are you? Why are you calling me? My mother abandoned me. She's not even interested in my fate." "Alexander, my dear, I left you." "Yes, you did." At the other end of the wire, a woman's hurried voice was heard. She was probably afraid that the guy would hang up early, and she would not have time to say the most important thing. "I don't have much time left. My husband died, Ivan, remember? He saved you and me. I was pregnant with his baby, but it was stillborn. And now it's the other way around. Our second child was born, but my husband is gone, dead of lung cancer. You have a brother. I'd really like you to meet him." "I'm not interested in all this. I lost my mother many years ago. You probably want money from me, don't you? Charlatan." Alexander pressed the button. That's it. Silence. The woman never called again. "What's the problem, brother?" Scar's face was right behind Sasha's back. He was squinting curiously at the guy. "No, it was a wrong number." Alexander shrugged. "They were telling me some bullshit about a new rejuvenation procedure." Scar laughed loudly. "You suggested to your fiancée, Angelica. I think she'll appreciate it." "Angelica, you're the only thing I have now," the guy thought fondly. A month later, Alexander drove the updated Ford out of the garage. Scar invested a lot of money to fix the dents, broken glass, some parts. The car was repainted red, and black stripes were put on top of the hood. Ford now looked like a racing car. Alexander was pleased and happy like a child. The late grandfather's pride was on the move again. The old man heard a mooing. Inside the car, stubbornly wanted to communicate with him. "You know, I've seen so much in my life you have no idea," whispered Alexander, tightly pressed against the trunk. The sounds got louder. "And if you had imagined it, you go gray. I disarmed more than one criminal group with this car. And how many times I've raced it with brothers. And I always came in first. You got the wrong guy. You think if I drive an old car, I'm gonna get hurt? Now lie there and think. I hope you're comfortable." Angelica pressed her lips together. Talking about a new car irritated Alexander. How could Angelica talk about such things? She was not the one who sat and repaired the radiator for hours. She was not the one who repainted the scratched trunk for the third time. Women are one word. Irritated by the conversation with his wife, the old man went to the garage. The family lived in the suburbs of Washington. In a very prestigious village, Alexander was able to earn enough money for a rich old age. While her husband was hobbling around in the Ford, Angelica was packing a snack for a fishing trip and preparing a carrier for Rocky. The woman loved going out. She liked to spend time in nature or, in general, out of the house. Alexander was silent all the way, and only when he was sorting out the bags with fishing rods he calmed down a little. Rocky was already frolicking in the grass, and Angelica spread a colorful plate and laid out food. Fruit, baked potatoes, sandwiches. Her husband had already chosen a spot and spread his fishing rods with bait. Angelica quietly approached him. "Don't be angry," I snapped. "It's all right. I am no longer angry," condescendingly replied Alexander. His gaze was focused on the fishing line in the river water. "You know, I even like it, a rarity after all. It's been through so much with us. Yes, it has. It will survive us, Alexander said quietly. At that moment, someone took the bait. The line twitched. Another moment and grandfather, with a shout of joy, pulled out a crucian carp. The fish was caught on the side of the hook and twitched ridiculously. It's a pity he can't let it back out. The wound is too deep. We'll have to fry it, he said sadly. Angelica's attention was distracted by a noise coming from a little above the clearing where they were camped. While her husband was fishing, the woman quietly walked up the path. The path was so steep that sometimes Angelica had to grab onto large weeds growing out of the ground. Finally, the woman made her way out into a nearby clearing. The place was very tempting. Angelica even regretted that she and Alexander had not climbed a little higher. The clearing was surrounded on all sides by old birch trees, and the middle was empty, without bushes and trees. Very cozy, but something else caught the woman's eye. In the distance, at the very edge of the clearing, a fire was burning. Well, it's an outrage. Who would think of burning a fire in the forest? It's not far to a fire. Angelica looked at the people who were at the fire, but without her glasses, it was extremely difficult to see their faces. A little to the left stood a few foreign cars of the latest models. I wonder how they got here. We'll have to take a closer look, Angelica thought. Just then, a cat darted under the woman's feet with a growl and hiss. It was Rocky. He, like lightning, rushed on all sails to the merry company. Rocky, stop. You stupid animal. You'll get caught in the fire. But the fat man didn't react. Angelica had no choice but to follow the cat to the fire. Up close, it became clear that in the clearing gathered local majors, sons of rich parents. Angelica knew almost all of them by sight, but one guy remained a mystery. He kept a little apart from the others. Seeing the disheveled Angelica, the company started throwing obscene jokes in her direction. They're drunk. A hunch flashed through the woman's mind. We need to be careful with them. Who the hell is this? Yelled one of the majors in a slurred voice. Have you come to drink with us? Join us. All right, take it easy. I'll find Rocky and quickly escape from the clearing to Alexander. The main thing is to be polite to these young men. Good evening. Say, have you seen a cat around here? He ran towards the fire. Well, mother, what are you using? The biggest of the guys laughed. We don't see anyone here but an old woman. What cat? What's he doing in the woods? He ran away from me. Angelica tried to smile, but her eyes were drawn to a white spot in the grass, not far from the burning flames. Could it be a swan? The woman stared in silence for a moment, then decided to ask, who is that sitting in the grass? Oh, that's our dinner tonight. We caught it in the park. He was screaming like crazy. Would you like some fried swan? They say it's a delicacy. A guy standing on the sidelines suddenly started talking. Mother, I wish you'd get out of here. I know you and your husband. Go in peace. Don't disturb me. We'll find a cat and bring it to you. You're fishing in the lower meadow by the lake, aren't you? Mark, what are you doing to her? The fat man grumbled. Let her stay with us. Let her get away. Her husband is probably sitting there looking at frogs, and the old woman is bored. Come here, chicken, we'll give you a treat, and you'll cut up a swan for us. The boy laughed and made an unmistakable gesture with his hand. Archie, calm your talents, said calmly Mark. Woman, go back where you came from. No, Mark, you keep your mitts down. What a leader you are. The knife will soon replace you. He'll get well and come back. The knife won't come back, Mark answered, twisting a long thread sticking out of his t-shirt on his finger. I won't let him. We've had enough adventures on our heads. Let him look for new slaves. Young people intervened. Finally, Angelica, maybe you let the poor bird go. It's suffering, and I'll bring you my cooking. Go away, woman. Your cooking is already cold. Eat it yourself with your old man. Archie turned to the company. Guys, why don't we go and have a taste of that old bag's cooking first, and then come back and roast this lovely bird? No, Angelique pleaded. Please don't kill the animal. It hasn't done anything to you. Hear that? Mark stepped out of the shadows and crossed his arms over his chest. Who are you to be calling the shots here? Meanwhile, Rocky, trotting around looking for a missing field mouse, flew right at the company and slammed his whole body into Archie's leg. What the hell is that lump of bones? The fat mountain was genuinely surprised. The guy picked up the meowing animal and looked slyly at Angelica. She froze from fear and surprise. What will they do now, these spoiled rich people? Here, Mark, let us throw this furry one into the fire. What would happen to him? The fat man shrieked with lively interest. The others supported the fellow with whistles and shouts. No, shrieked Angelica and rushed to Archie. Mark, sensing a showdown, stood in front of Archie. His face expressed both determination and despair mixed with uncertainty. Alexander, meanwhile, was fishing. He had caught several large redfish and now glanced at the bucket occasionally, clucking his tongue in pleasure. The absence of his wife did not bother him. Angelica liked to walk alone in the woods. The old man's tranquility was interrupted by Angelica's desperate cry from the upper clearing. The old man, who had been in all sorts of fights, quickly rushed to the ford and pulled out a hunting rifle from the trunk. He checked if it was loaded. Alexander did not even remember how he climbed up the slope. He had already imagined a ferocious boar pouncing on his favorite woman. But what was his surprise when the picture of consciousness and the present did not match? There were 7 men in the clearing, all young boys. They had surrounded someone and were discussing something heatedly. Well, disperse to the sides, Alexander commanded and clicked the bolt of the gun. The crowd dispersed immediately. Grandpa, what are you doing? Drop the gun, Archie babbled. Alexander only now noticed that Angelica was lying face down in the grass, her dress slightly raised. Hey, you bastards, get on your rigs and get the hell out of here, roared Alexander, swinging his weapon threateningly. Old man, take your wife and get the hell out of here. We didn't touch anyone, but yours came here and started asserting her rights. Mark glinted his eyes in the darkness. He, unlike his friends, held himself with pride and courage. Who are you to tell me what to do? Maybe you also have a gun. Alexander's eyebrows flew up. The whole elite town knew about the old man's past, and no one had ever crossed him. And here are the youngsters. Arrogant, drunken majors. I don't have a gun yet, but Knife's gonna give me his armory soon. You know who he is, don't you? I know who the hell he is. He ain't giving you nothing. Boys. Archie, meanwhile, had let go of the hissing cat. He must have had a new prank in its head. Let's shake the old man's wheelbarrow and see if the 100-year-old dust falls off. The other majors howled approvingly, some of them already headed for the path leading down. Angelica sat down on the grass and quickly lowered the hem of her dress. The screaming cat scrambled into her mistress's arms. The swan also made a sound. Its cry, like the sound of a trumpeter, cut through the silence of the forest. And Che, Mark's face stretched out and became like the image of a demon. And really, boys, his Ford is probably downstairs. Those Jews don't have any other cars. That's weird. You stole a lot of money and you can't buy something new. Halt. There was the sound of gunfire. Some of the guys crouched down, covering their heads with their hands. Archie was stunned. Mark just jerked and then froze again. What a shot. Are you crazy? One of the majors shrieked fearfully. So Alexander began quietly. His voice trembled, but the old man spoke confidently, thinking over every word. It goes like this. Now you release the poor bird, give it to us. Then you apologize to my wife. And last of all, you get on your cool cars and get out of here. Angelique was still sitting there sobbing. Alexander, I'm so scared. Come here, Angelica. Alexander gently drew the woman to him and kissed her. He was beautiful in this anger. Immediately remembered the slutty 90s as he, together with Scar, brought order to the spontaneous markets, collected taxes from sellers and shuttle traders, selling quality clothes from Turkey. And now some gang of teenagers led by a stupid boy want to show him, one of the leaders of the criminal gang, how to live. No, that's not gonna happen. Who's in charge here? He asked in a businesslike manner. The silence lasted only a few seconds. Mark stepped forward and proudly stuck out his chest. Well, me? What now? Do you have a car? Mark nodded in agreement. The guys froze in surprise. What's going to happen now? Let's make a bet. Whoever is the first with his car to arrive at the conditional place will yield. And I'll be in charge of our elite neighborhood again, just like before. And Knife will be my assistant. There was a surprised murmur in the crowd. Mark grinned crookedly. Your car will die right away. Are you sure? The grandfather asked slyly. Then let's check it out. Get your car out on the highway. Mark went to his car. The others quickly took seats in other foreign cars. Everyone was interested to see the spectacle in which an old man, a former brother, would be trampled by car wheels. Alexander also turned and headed for his car. "What are you up to, you old chump?" Angelica ran behind and could not hold back her anger. "How are you going to compete with these teenagers? They'll overtake you in the first few seconds." "Quiet, wife. Let's go faster. Don't forget your Rocky. Don't worry." Alexander got into the car. Angelica and her cat squeezed into the back seat. The guys were already waiting for them on the highway. Someone took out a cell phone, ready to film the old man's shame. "Show me what you have under the hood," Alexander asked, as if he were an experienced racer. "You have never seen anything like this before. Look and memorize," said Mark proudly. He opened the lid. Alexander whistled. "Well done. You've put a lot of amplification. Will the car withstand such acceleration?" "You can be sure. When I'm the winner, you'll be my personal slave, remember." Mark smiled wryly. "Deal. But when I win, you'll give me all your power and your boys. They will become my assistants." "Oh, yes. And the swan too." "All right then. Let's see the inside of your car. I hope you haven't rusted through the lid yet." The crowd erupted in laughter. Archie threw obscene gestures and jokes in the direction of Alexander and Angelica. His wife stood nearby, hesitant to raise her eyes to look at the Ford. When the old man lifted the hood, the guys immediately fell silent. "Eh? And how did it all fit here?" Mark asked in surprise. "You have to have a special mind. To make a racing car out of a Soviet car," the old man proudly stuck out his chest. Mark whistled. The guys were looking at the pumped-up motor with great interest. "Well, let's go," Alexander asked cheerfully. "Well, let's go." Mark's voice sounded less confident. "Sit down, Angelica. I'll take you for a ride," said the old man to his wife. "But don't be afraid. I'll strap you in and you won't even notice that you're flying at the speed of light. Come on, come on." Archie made a mark on the asphalt where the race would start. "Listen, are you sure of yourself? Did you see what's under the old man's hood?" he asked Mark. I did. But I'm not backing out," he said stubbornly. He checked the wheels and brakes, then nodded to Alexander. That meant the guy was ready to race. Alexander, his wife, whined in the back seat while Alexander was carefully fastening her seatbelt. "You're crazy. We're going to die. It's not too late to refuse." "My dear," the old man told her loudly, "I won't be me if I refuse such a duel. Understand? It's a matter of principle." When the racers were in full gear, the crowd poured onto the road. Thankfully, the always busy track was empty today. It was all about making the race happen. "All right," Archie shouted. His face was crimson with tension. "Here we go. On the count of 1, you start warming up your engines. And on the count of 3, you move forward. The finish line is at the starting point. You get to the brickyard, and at the first fork, you turn around. Whoever gets there first is the winner. To keep the race fair, I'll personally go to the factory and make sure you don't take any shortcuts. Mark, good luck to you. Go for it. And for you, old man, I wish your tires burst at the first kilometer." The crowd hooted and jeered. Angelica prayed and wailed loudly in the back seat. The cat was yelling at the top of its lungs. Alexander, the only calm passenger in the car, smoothly turned the key. The Ford rumbled. Someone kicked the hood with force. The majors were obviously not happy that the car had started. 3, Archie shouted. "Come on, my dear," Alexander shouted joyfully. The 2 cars started at the same time, but the Ford slowed down noticeably before the first corner. The crowd of majors, seeing this, rejoiced and made noise. Alexander, long ago, when he worked together with Scar, remodeled his baby, made it a racing car. Angelica was not interested in men's affairs, so the woman did not even guess what kind of speed monster the rusty trowel had turned into. Alexander liked to drive together with his mentor and often won in these races. He had gained a lot of experience in this tricky business, and now the old man slowed down for a reason. "It's like running a marathon," he remembered Scar's words. "You have to stop a little at first, so that you can make a big push before the finish line. Only then will you succeed." "We will succeed," Alexander said loudly and pressed the gas pedal with force. The car, like lightning, raced toward the brickyard. Mark's car was far behind. "Oh God," Angelique screamed. "What's this doing, God? Do you like it, Angelica?" he asked excitedly. "I'll kill you at home," she yelled back, "just as soon as we get home. You better crash now." "Len, you don't let me shake the old days." Alexander laughed and pressed the gas pedal again. Ford with a rattle past the conditional marking of the finish line. The old man braked sharply. Rocky flew forward. Angelica gasped and froze. Mark's car didn't appear on the track until several minutes later. It was making a strange squealing noise. When the car pulled up, Alexander noticed that one of the wheels was oddly twisted. Mark rumbled grudgingly as he got out of his car. "Well, what?" asked him joyful Alexander. "Everything as we agreed. I won. So fulfill your promise." "What did I say?" Mark said, smiling slyly. "Did you find a fool? If it weren't for the flat tire, I'd have come first. What difference does it make?" Alexander asked the guy, surprised. "We had a deal. If I win, you give me all your company, and the Swan in addition, for re-education. Did we sign a contract with you, old man?" "We didn't." "Come on. Make sure we don't accidentally take your carriage off its wheels. Go home and calm down." Satisfied with himself, Mark turned and walked toward the crowd. He got into Archie's car, and the others hurried to their cars. The race was over, but all was not fair. The noisy bunch of majors hurried toward town. Mark's car remained parked on the road. "I'll show you how to live by the rules." Alexander spat angrily. Angelica got out of the car and tried to console her husband, but it was all in vain. The grandfather, who had a great Oriental character, started up like a new engine. "Let's at least take the bird," Angelica said quietly. The Swan must have stayed in the clearing. These young people do not write any rules. They do what they want. They do what they damn well please. "All right, let's go and get your fishing rods and your bird. You'll think what to do with him. Swans don't live here." The husband and wife got back into the Ford. The old man was in the worst mood. Angelica knew that such a state of mind would do him no good. Rocky sullenly climbed into her lap and purred. The animal definitely did not appreciate such a race. The Swan sat obediently by the fire. The majors had tied its legs and wings with strong twine quite tightly. The bird looked at Angelica exhaustedly. The animal did not even resist when the woman untied the ropes. "Good God, he has wounds on his wings. He must have lashed out and hurt himself. Those bastards. Look, wife, what I found." Alexander picked up something shiny from the grass. It was an army badge with the initials Sir Bradcovem engraved on it. Who could it be? "We need to find out. They don't issue badges like that in the US. I don't understand. Guy must have served overseas. It's weird how a guy in the service got mixed up with a bunch of majors. We should get it back to whoever lost it," Angelica said firmly. "Of course. That's what we'll do," said the grandfather slowly. And in his head, he had a cunning plan to frighten the majors. Yes, so that for the rest of his life. While Angelica was gathering the cool provisions from the plate, Alexander was putting away the fishing rods with a stony face. There was no catch. They didn't often come home from fishing trips empty-handed, but today was a special occasion that knocked the old man out of his usual rut. He hadn't done his old business from the 90s for a long time, but he remembered how Schramm had dealt with those brothers who betrayed him. Alexander was even afraid sometimes of his comrades' such sophisticated methods of torture that he came up with. After such an incident with the race, it's a matter of honor. To avenge his offense, they decided to put the Swan on the back seat. The bird sat obediently next to Angelica. The woman trembling hands stroked him and whispered something to the Swan. "Alexandra, let's leave him at home." "Well, at least for now. The Swan's wings are bleeding. He won't survive on his own. Please." "All right," Alexander muttered. His thoughts were not at all about the wounded bird. "Just take care of him yourself. Leave me out of it." Angelica sparkled with happiness. Rocky hissed unhappily at the bird, obviously not liking the neighborhood. "I will track down this brave man who broke our treaty, and I will punish him. I won't kill him, of course, but I'll scare him so badly that he won't want to cross my path again. The main thing is that my wife won't find out and won't let me live." Alexander steadily turned the steering wheel of the car. Angelica fell asleep under the measured roar of the engine. The house appeared. There was bad weather outside. It was pouring heavy rain. "You won't go out today?" The man looked at the raindrops dripping down the dirty window frame. He put his hand under his head and thought. The recent incident on the highway with the strange old man in the Ford was on his mind. What a grandfather lives. He doesn't even look like an old man. He seems to be quite young. There's no way an old man could drive a car so skillfully. Well, or he was a race car driver back in the day. Interesting. thought Mark. He was very hungry, but there was a mouse hanging in the refrigerator. The car the man had recently taken to the shop was badly dented and made a terrible screeching noise when he drove it. He didn't want to walk to the store for groceries. Mark got up on the bed and found his cell phone. Hello? Hey Archie, are you busy? Hi, came a sleepy voice from the receiver. I'm actually still asleep. What do you want? Do you want to come with me? Grab a bite to eat. No, I'm out. I had a little too much to drink last night. Too bad you weren't there. How's your Ariana? Did she show you around? Mark sighed. He met a pretty girl at a rich friend's party last night. Ariana had noticed the cute guy too. Their feelings flared up briefly, and the man decided to invite the girl to his home. But when Ariana stepped over the threshold of Mark's modest dwelling, her welcoming face changed abruptly. What kind of shack is this? She asked irritably. Mark hugged the girl, but she pulled away. This is my apartment. What, you don't like it? That's strange. I thought you were as rich as your friends. Well, you got something strong. Mark was surprised. Ariana seemed like a very modest girl at the party. This behavior of the girl indicated that the young lady just wanted to make money from the young major through short meetings. You know, I don't keep alcohol at home. It's bad for your health, Mark muttered. The mood had clearly soured. Ariana noticed that. Okay, I should probably get going. It's boring here, she smiled. Go, Mark replied dryly. I knew I wouldn't meet a normal girl at a party where the only people there were profiteers. But Ariana was already gone. The door slammed and the apartment was quiet. Mark gave himself his word that he would find a girl who would love him not for money and wealth. Yes, she did. Mark answered Archie briefly. I knew you were a male. Is she with you? No, she left early this morning. I was still asleep. Archie laughed. You make sure you've got everything you need. Ariana likes to steal shiny things from other people's houses. Mark looked around with a sigh. What could be stolen? An old sofa or a chest of drawers? All right, Archie, rest up. I'll have breakfast myself. Mark replied, trying to sound cheerful, and hummed up quickly. It's worth a little bit of backtracking. Mark was born into a complete family and grew up alone, without brothers and sisters. His father became very ill and passed away soon after. His mother followed his father a few years later. Mark was already an adult at that time, and to his great happiness, he was not threatened with an orphanage. From his parents, Mark received an apartment in Washington. At first, the guy tried to study and work, but Mark soon abandoned his studies and had to work hard to survive in the capital. Suddenly, Mark received a summons to the army. The guy did not want to mow from the service, and money to escape from the army was nowhere to take. The guy was taken for service in the paratroopers, and in 6 months, he and his platoon were mobilized to California, a hot spot at the time, to help resolve the conflict. There Mark earned a wound and was soon returned home. The service ended, but a reminder of the terrible months of ruthless war served as an army badge with his initials Sir Briakov Mark. After the army, it was very difficult to find a normal job in the city. Mark went to the elite neighborhoods. He hoped that the rich needed workers. And indeed, one family took the guy to them as a loader. Mark had to help the owner in the store to unload goods. The work was hard and dirty, irregular, but the owners paid well, so the guy was in no hurry to leave. That's where Mark met Archie, the pampered son of rich majors. Archie at first mocked the simple guy, but Mark was not timid either. He saw that the major collects weapons. The guy, fighting in a hot spot, learned to handle knives, guns, automatic rifles. So he gladly taught Archie to shoot. The guy spent hours at the range. Acquaintance grew into a strong friendship. Mark became a kind of family member. Archie introduced the guy to his company of young majors. Did not immediately accept him, but the stories of service in the army very interested them. In 6 months, Mark was already a kind of gang leader. He knew that it was necessary for the sons of the rich to frolic, to create something unusual, to shoot a cool video for his channel. Mark helped with that. After the guy had raced with the old man in a Ford and then refused to fulfill the terms of the contract, Archie and his company respected Mark even more. To them, feelings of responsibility, duty, honor were alien. Mark, of course, felt uncomfortable bullying the older man, but he had no right to act otherwise. The rich majors would stop accepting him, and he would become a beggar again. Poverty was what Mark feared most of all. The man got out of bed and stretched. No, this is impossible. Why did it start raining only when it was urgent to go out? Well, you could call a food delivery service, but you have to shell out a lot of money for delivery. In the pocket of the jacket should be a business card. The other day, a man went for new jeans in the hypermarket, and one very pretty teenage girl slipped him a card with an advertisement for food delivery. Here it was. On one side was a picture of a pink flamingo standing on one leg and looking off into the distance. On the other side was an address and a contact number. Flamingo won't let you starve to death. The slogan read, "Well, let's see what they have on the menu," Mark said thoughtfully and went to the computer. But then his intentions were interrupted by the loud ringing of his cell phone. It was Archie. "Did you change your mind?" Mark asked cheerfully. "No," he mumbled. "I'm calling you because I got locked out of my house this morning by that grandfather who threatened us with a gun in the clearing." Mark fell silent. Strange. What does this weirdo want again? Maybe he wants to raise some more. And what did he want? Archie was silent for a few seconds, then said abruptly, "He found your badge in the clearing. He wants to give it back." "No way," Mark replied thoughtfully. "I always carried it in my breast pocket. How could it have fallen out?" "I don't know," replied the friend, "but my grandfather refused to give it to me. He wants to meet you in person. Anyway, I gave him your phone number and you'll figure it out. Bye." There were short beats in the phone, which meant that the conversation was over. Mark put down his cell phone and went into the hallway. He searched the pockets of his jacket for a long time, but the token was nowhere to be found. So after all, he lost it, the man said to himself in confusion. How could he do that? To lose the most precious thing. Mark went back into the hallway and frantically checked his pockets. Phew, the photo of his mother was still there. The man grieved for a very long time after the death of the dearest person. The photo of his mother always reminded him that her soul was somewhere near, protecting his son from problems and danger. Mark carefully kissed the tattered photo and hid it in his breast pocket. The phone rang long in the hall. What a morning. I should have slept all day and turned off my cell phone. Strange, an unfamiliar number. Hello, Mark shouted irritably. There was dense silence in the receiver. I'm listening to you, repeated the man. Are you deaf or what? Remember me? Suddenly a hoarse voice sounded sharply. We had a race with you. You also sent me away then. Ah, it's you, Grandpa? What do you want from my badge? I know you have it. I'll meet you at that forest clearing. Tomorrow night, we'll have a man-to-man talk there. Okay, Mark replied. Let's do it at 8 o'clock sharp. The connection was cut off at the other end. Old bore, you want adventure at the end of your life. You're bored with life. Well, nothing. We'll see what he's up to. Mark smiled to himself. Such mystery and the place of meeting even turned the guy on, inflamed his imagination. Mark decided to do more mundane things and went to look at the delivery menu. Meanwhile, Alexander sat at home, in a soft armchair and had breakfast. Angelica had prepared an excellent omelet, which was impossible not to eat. The cat lazily jumped on the windowsill and looked at the gray wall of rain. Yes, I wanted to clean the yard today, put the flower beds in order, grumbled unhappily Angelica. Wife, don't grumble, Alexander said cheerfully, devouring the second portion of omelet. Go and read a book or embroider. Have a rest. The doorbell rang. Strange. Angelica was surprised. Who could come in such bad weather? Alexander, yours. Mine, the old man rubbed his palms. Go upstairs. It's not a woman's business to listen to men's secrets. Watch me, threatened Angelica with a finger. I'll find out that again you are robbing. Alexander got up from the chair and hugged his wife. Do not worry, my love. I've long been away from it. Just men bored at home came to me and backgammon to play. Angelica waved her hand, smiled, and went up the steep steps to the second floor. Alexander jogged across the huge hallway and opened the door. On the doorstep stood his old friends, Steve and Mickey. Hi, why are you chasing us in this weather? Steve asked grudgingly. Mickey, meanwhile, deftly took off his soaked jacket and carried it into the bathroom to hang it on the dryer. That's a case, Alexander said quietly and put his finger to his lips, but not to anyone. This is our secret case for the three of us. Old man, have you decided to go back to the past? Well, I'll tell you that it's not the 90s anymore. Even the local police used to be afraid of us, but now they'll put their hands behind your back if you take a wrong turn. It's a matter of honor. Don't just stand on the doorstep. Come in. Take off your boots. Is your wife scrubbing the floors for you? Steve, meanwhile, had come back from the bathroom. He was standing by the fireplace, warming his hands with pleasure. It's not even fall yet, but it's so cold, he wondered. Well, come on, tell me about it. Mickey and Steve were practically the same age as Alexander. They met when they were all working for Scar. A strong friendship developed. Their wives were friends too. I've already told you what happened to Angelica and me in that unfortunate clearing. Alexander began, as his friends settled into the warm, soft armchairs around the fireplace. Yes, it was. Mickey smiled wryly. The flames from the fireplace danced in his pupils. But what do you want now? Do you want revenge? Brother, you know the law of the boomerang. That brat hurt me badly and wanted to abuse my wife with his gang. Isn't that proof enough for you? If you don't want to help me, I won't force you. Go home. Steve will be enough for me. Well, don't get too excited. I just swore to my wife and children that I would no longer decide who lives and who dies. Steve nodded in agreement. He always listened for a long time and then spoke. No one is going to kill anyone. Alexander shouted and was immediately afraid of his own shout. Angelica could hear it. The old man listened for a minute, but the second floor was quiet. Apparently, his wife had dozed off. Then he continued in a whisper. I want to scare him. Remember what Scar did to us. Steve raised his bushy eyebrows in surprise. You want to stick this guy in a trunk and keep him there like an animal, then drive him into the thicket and let him out? Yes, answered Alexander innocently. I was badly offended, and Lena was also tried to rape. So an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. I don't know, said Mickey quietly. I don't want to go to jail for kidnapping in my old age. So you'll just help me catch him and put him in the trunk. I'll take care of the rest. Wait a minute, Steve. You don't want a guy to suffer in the trunk of your rusty truck. You can't even stay in there for an hour. Either you help me, or you walk away and forget about our friendship. We'd have always defended our honor and pride together. And now there are two fat bastards sitting in front of me, afraid to even move a leg. Alexander got up from his chair and went to the window. Well, if we can hide our faces so we can't be seen, Steve began, we can help. Yeah, Mickey mumbled. Alexander turned around excitedly. I knew you were real friends. We'll talk about it now. The main thing is not to tell your wives. We'll make up an excuse for our absence. The three old men gathered around the table again and began to discuss the plan of action in whispers. It was only after midnight when Angelica decided to please the guests with her special fish pie. The next day the rain did not hurry to leave the city. On the contrary, the downpour turned into a tedious and monotonous rain. The only thing that pleased the eye was the lush greenery, which had revived after a long heat wave. The foliage hung with pleasure in the light breeze. Alexander sat in the kitchen and twirled a cup with cool tea in his hands. Yesterday with his friends they had thought over a plan of action to educate the young and insolent guy. Now it was only necessary to wait for the agreed time. Lately the swan, which Angelica called Baron, was able to walk around the house, proudly raising his head. Poor Rocky was locked up in one of the rooms. The bird and the cat did not want to be friends. Delighted with the swan's recovery, Angelica ran after the bird and collected droppings all over the house. Now Baron proudly came out of the corner and approached Alexander in search of a treat. Well, you insolent creature, the old man crumpled. Hold the cookie. The swan quickly swallowed a piece of cookie and nodded gratefully. Angelica came down from the second floor. She was in good spirits today, despite the rain. Alexander, you have thought of everything so well. It's been ages since I sat with my friends and had a heart-to-heart talk with them. I've been so busy. Are you going to Steve's tonight? Alexander smiled and nodded. Good. I'm off to pick out my outfit. The woman smiled and walked briskly back. Her loud, melodious singing sounded from the room. If you had known what kind of party we were going to go to, you would have eaten your brains out with a tablespoon long ago, Alexander muttered and gave the swan some more cookies. That's it, go. You can't eat too much flour. My wife will scold me for spoiling her, he smiled. The Baron shouted understandingly and went into the living room. Yes, you haven't shit there yet. The old man shouted after the bird. Nothing, your mom will clean up after you. Time dragged on like hot caramel, slowly and tediously. At 8:30, there was a noise of a car outside the gate. They're here. A few minutes later, the house was filled with a buzz. Women in bright dresses and expensive makeup swooped on Angelica like magpies. The wife was glowing with happiness, which couldn't be said for the men. The three friends were silent. "Well," said Alexander, "I leave you the most valuable thing, my wife. Have fun to the fullest. We'll go too." Angelica kissed her husband. She was already bustling around the table with bottles, plates, flowers from the flower bed. Steve, Mickey, and Alexander left the house together. "I'd rather stay in the company of women tonight," Mickey muttered and looked up at the sky. "It's gray and boring." "You're like a woman yourself." Steve clapped his friend on the shoulder. "Alexander, shall we go in your car?" "Yeah, I've got everything ready." Steve looked at the trunk and clucked his tongue. "What's with the guns?" "Well, you never know. He's gonna attack. We'll have to be on the safe side." In the trunk, in addition to the gun, there was a water bottle, thick ropes, duct tape, and black hats with eye holes. "I never thought I'd be doing this again in my old age," Mickey muttered as Alexander pulled out of the garage. It was cramped and stuffy in the car. "Open a window. You could suffocate." "It's okay. Now we'll drive with the wind," Alexander consoled his friend. Steve turned on the stereo. The car was filled with the sounds of an orchestra. "It's more fun that way," he replied, embarrassed. The road to the meadow was quite beautiful. On both sides of the road were thick birch and maple trees. It seemed that you were moving in some mystical tunnel. Gradually, it was getting darker. There was not a single star in the sky. Rain fell in lonely drops on the car window. Alexander occasionally turned on the windshield wipers to remove the moisture and clean the glass. "It's a good thing there won't be any clouds tonight," Mickey whispered quietly. Steve nudged his comrade in the side. Both fell silent. "It should go well. I'll keep the kid locked up for a few days and let him out. At least he'll know not to mess with old people." Alexander tried to look cheerful, but he was not very good at it. Anxiety was growing in his heart. There was no telling what this major was up to. Maybe a knife blade would glitter in his hand, and the three friends would bid farewell to life forever. Or maybe he'll ambush them too. We don't know. The trail loomed ahead. The four drove briskly into the wet mud. The car was not afraid of such a road. Alexander passed the swampy area without obstacles and turned out on a familiar place. No one. The old man looked at his watch. It was still quite early. He was in too much of a hurry, driving fast. "We'll sit and wait," Steve said, putting on his hat. Mickey quickly followed him and also pulled on a black cloth with slits for eyes and mouth. "You look funny," Alexander said cheerfully, looking in the rearview mirror. "Oh, look, there's someone under the tree," Steve said, looking into the distance. Alexander looked ahead too. A little to the right of the forest road, there was a big maple tree. Someone was hiding under it. "He's here. Go to him," Mickey muttered, "and we'll join him later as agreed." "Steve, get out of the car. We've got to put on a nice little circle to get in the back." "Dan rain. There's already water in my boots from the swamp." While Steve enjoyed cursing the weather, Alexander fumbled in his pocket for a metal token. A fine lure. Grandfather had been fishing for years and he was a pro at it. His friends marveled every time the man brought back a huge catfish or pike in a net. "It will be the same kind of fishing. Only the bait is different and the fish are not fish at all," flew a silly thought in his head. Alexander resolutely opened the door. Mark had been freezing under the branches for a good half hour. The tree saved him from the rain, but not from the cold. When the boy saw the Ford pulling up, he was genuinely glad. The car was still under repair, and Archie had agreed to give Mark a ride to the clearing. But no more. The friend said he didn't have time to wait, turned around and drove away. Mark was left standing in the forest, at a complete loss. What a friend. What was there worth waiting for? "A few minutes. I'll remember him. As soon as I fix my car." Mark was angry and cold drops fell on his head. "Well, hello, Brad," Alexander said. He stood a little away from the boy and looked at him. The experienced eye of the former brother was searching for suspicious folds in his clothes. Had the major accidentally brought a weapon with him? Mark was silent. He only now realized that he was standing all alone in front of this strange old man in the forest. Various thoughts were swarming in his head. Where to run to if there was no car? Why hadn't he borrowed from Valerko one of the pistols from his huge collection? How come he had no friends with him? "Why don't you say something? Didn't you learn to say hello to your elders?" Alexander smiled. He took a token out of his pocket and waved it in front of the boy. Mark did not even see that two dark figures crossed the evening glade and disappeared behind the bushes. "Hello, old man. What do you want for that token? You didn't just come here to give it away, did you?" Alexander nodded. You don't know at all who you're messing with. Strange. Your major friends know, but you don't. Didn't they enlighten you? You're standing in front of a criminal mastermind who used to run this whole village and build people like you. So proud and arrogant, who don't know the meaning of manhood. I've never lived in this village, Mark shrugged. I work here for the owners. Sorry, I don't know who you are. So proudly sticking out its chest, Alexander continued, you humiliated me in front of your gang of rich and stupid freaks, and I want you to apologize to me in their presence. Mark's eyes widened. Are you out of your mind, old man? I'm not apologizing to you. Look for the fools. Suddenly the bushes nearby stirred, and two shadows hung over the guy. One low and broad, the other long and skinny. Mark tried to scream, but his mouth was shut. Tie him up, someone shouted in a bass voice. The last thing the boy heard was Alexander's commanding voice. Put him in the trunk. Careful, don't hurt his head. Hurry up. The shadows were arguing. The voices were unrecognizable. Mark lost consciousness for a moment. The car was bouncing on the bumps. We had to hurry. It would soon be night. The wides must not guess where their wives were. Alexander pressed the gas pedal hard, and the old Ford sped towards Steve's house. The old man drove Mickey and Steve home, and they said goodbye, promising to keep quiet. Upon reaching his house, Alexander saw lights in the windows. There was music playing loudly. That's good. They won't hear it if he yells, the old man thought. He drove the car into the garage and turned off the engine, listened to the sounds, then walked forward and opened the trunk. Mark lay there with no sign of life. The old man carefully checked his pulse and exhaled with relief. Alive. His mouth was tightly taped shut. His hands and feet were bound with twine. Alexander locked the trunk and left the garage. Now it will be necessary to play an exemplary grandfather, so that no one noticed that he was hiding something. Nothing, but at least one major will be re-educated. Yes, so that the guy will disappear the desire to argue with the elders. Alexander went into the house. Angelica and her friends were sitting at the table. All were already tipsy. My husband has arrived. The woman shouted cheerfully. Come here, sit down with us. You know, my dear, I'll even drink today. Alexander replied. The burning liquid warmed the body, and the head felt a little lighter. The old man helped his wife to call a cab for her friends. When the house was quiet, Angelica exhaled and plopped down on the small divan in the living room. You know, she said, it turns out Lucy and Steve are going to the Maldives for a month. They've already bought the tickets. Lucy was showing me pictures of what she's gonna wear to the beach. Despite her age, she's got a great figure. And I'm a mess. You are my most beautiful, hugged his wife Alexander, and you do not need any liposuction and injections of youth. Your Lucy cannot accept the fact that she is already 65. Alexander, promise me, blurred eyes Angelica looked at her husband. Promise that we will also fly to an island. I've never been abroad. All we did was drive around the USA. Lucy and Steve have traveled halfway around the world. I envy them. Of course we'll fly, Alexander said warmly, but we'll have to choose where to go. The main thing is not to be caught red-handed by the cops. Angelica quickly fell asleep in Alexander's arms. Her husband carefully covered her with a plate and went to the dining room to clean the table. He rinsed the plates and wiped the table. He put the set back in its place. He stood for a while, assessing the results of his labor. Then he left the house and headed for the garage. The car stood in total darkness, glinting with headlights. The old man opened the trunk. Mark was lying with his eyes open. When he saw Alexander, he twitched and mumbled. Come on, be quiet. Calm down, you will not succeed. Stay a little in the trunk. Maybe it'll clear your head a little. God willing, it'll all come out. The old man rummaged in Mark's pockets and pulled out a cell phone. The device was password protected. All right, the old man grumbled. I don't need to go through your cell phone. Let it stay at my place. Alexander closed the trunk and went into the house. His wife was asleep. He looked at the clock. It was already past midnight. He lay down on the bed next to Angelica. She hugged him and snoozed peacefully again. Sleep stubbornly did not come. Alexander stared at the shadows that lined up on the wall in a bizarre pattern. And the wind made them move. The branches of the trees created their wonderful theater of shadows. How can I sleep, Lord? I've never felt such remorse before. And now I just feel like an executioner, he thought, putting one hand behind his head. Angelica woke up and stared sleepily at her husband. Alexander, why are you awake? I don't feel like it. Sleep doesn't come to me in any way, he mumbled in reply. Take a sleeping pill, advised his wife. Yeah, sleep, my dear, sleep. I'll be right there. He got up, put on his robe. His wife was already dozing. Alexander quietly went out into the corridor. There was a sepulchral silence in the house. The Baron slept on his perch by the fireplace in the living room. The old man tiptoed past the bird. To wake the swan is not worth it. You will raise such a scream that not only Angelica, but part of the village will wake up. It was a bright night outside. Despite the cold rain, which had been pouring for several days in a row, it was quite warm. The large puddles had managed to dry up a little. Alexander walked up to the garage in his slippers. He kept thinking that Mark's screaming was about to come out of it. He couldn't stand it any longer and went into the small room again. Ford, the pride of more than one generation, stood, gleaming round headlights. Not a single sound. Alexander leaned over the trunk and whispered, "Be patient for a while, and I'll let you out. Don't scream and don't try to run, and don't try to tell anyone. You know, there are many quiet ravines." I stood again, listening to the perfect silence. He couldn't bear to lift the heavy lid. Beating eyes stared at him. The boy was crying. "Why are you doing this?" Alexander was sincerely surprised. "You were so brave, and here you are crying like a girl. If you're already going to the end, then go." The guy mumbled and pointed at his jeans. They were wet. "Wow, I didn't think of a restroom for a guy," thought the old man frustratedly. Something had to be decided. Alexander spat angrily, closed the trunk with a clatter, and got behind the wheel. He drove for a long time. It was starting to get light. "Here I got into trouble," irritated old man said to himself. Such an idea to close the kid in the trunk for the fact that he just stumbled. Old asshole. The car turned off the road and drove onto a dirt path. Alexander kept his course toward the forest thicket. It was the first time he had seen these thickets. By the way, the old man had long ago left the borders of the region and drove into an unknown village. The forest was thick and overgrown. Alexander stopped at a small clearing. He stood for a few more minutes just like that. He listened to the barking of dogs, the noise of trees. Not a soul was around. Only the moon illuminated the grass, the leaves, and the car. Alexander sighed, walked to the trunk, and opened it. The boy's face begged for mercy. "I wanted to keep you much longer, of course," Alexander began, looking straight into Mark's eyes, but took pity. "I can't watch you ruin my trunk anymore. Anyway, you could be glad I'm letting you go. But my main condition is that you don't know me, you haven't seen me, and you haven't been in my trunk. Understand?" Mark nodded. A tear ran down his dusty face like a rivulet. "All right, if you so much as mention this to anyone, you're on your own. I'll kill you, but I'll find your ugly little soul. You've seen my friends? They'll help too, you can be sure of that. Now I'm gonna untie you quietly. Go away. By the way, we're a long way from our village, about 50 kilometers away. Look for ways to get home on your own." Alexander took out a knife and carefully cut the ropes first on his hands, then on his feet. Mark pulled the duct tape off his face with a groan. "Hold your badge and cell phone," Alexander mumbled. The guy nodded silently and took the items. He carefully slipped the cell phone and token into the breast pocket of his jacket. Suddenly, a crumpled photo flew out of there. "You dropped it." Grandpa carefully picked up the black and white photo. On it was someone very familiar. Eyes, lips, affectionate smile, hands. "Where did you get this picture?" wailed Alexander. His mother, Selena, was looking at him from the photo. "I've always had it," the boy said quietly. "Why? Where did you get it from?" Alexander's face stretched. As if from the distant past, his mother stood before the old man, crying in front of the airplane ramp. And below lay his sisters in a pool of blood. In the distance, his father fell to his knees with a confused face. Near him lay the ill-fated machine gun. "This is a picture of my mother. She gave it to me when I was a teenager. I've kept it with me ever since. My mother is dead, but the memory of her is with me always." "I don't believe it," Alexander said firmly. "It's my mother, Selena. She and I ran away from California, then lived with my grandparents. Then she went to visit the volunteer who saved us then and disappeared. That volunteer is my father," Mark said quietly. There was a fog in his head. "Even. And I'm Mark. My mom used to tell me that she came to visit my dad when she was very young. She didn't tell me she still had kids. I guess she didn't want to, but she used to call someone and cry a lot. I was born when my mom was over 40. My parents were very fond of me, loved me equally well, but they both died too soon. I was already an adult, so I did not go to an orphanage, but stayed in my apartment. Good God, Alexander exclaimed. How did you end up here, in an elite neighborhood? I was looking for a job, that's all, simply answered Mark. I got a job as a loader for a rich major. Unloaded groceries. Met Archie. So what? So you're my little brother? Mark smiled shyly. I guess I am. You're my maternal brother. I'm sorry, the old man's heart couldn't take it. I didn't know. You hurt me so much after the race that I wanted to teach you a little lesson. But I swear I'd never do that to my own brother. Tell me, was your mom even happy with your dad even? I mean, my grandmother told me that my mom ran away from home with some scoundrel. And I believed it. Can you believe it? Honestly, I hadn't heard a word about you, Mark said thoughtfully. But if I had, I wouldn't have wasted a minute looking for you. I have no one but my parents. I'm alone in life. Alexander suddenly smiled. He sat down on a stump and covered his face with his hands. What an accident that brought us together. Mark stood next to him. He hadn't quite realized everything that was happening in his life yet. The guy just got over the fact that he was tied up and locked in the trunk, and here, it turns out that the one who tied him up is the most dear person. Alexander wiped away a stingy male tear. You know what, Mark? Get in the car. Where are you going? The boy asked. The fear was gradually receding. Let's go, Alexander corrected him, to our house. I'll introduce you to my wife. If you want, you can live with us. There's plenty of room, enough for everyone. You'll be for your brother, and for the son of your children God didn't give you. By the way, remember that swan your gang of majors we're going to fry. He lives at our house. Let's go. Change your clothes, have a decent meal. Tell me about your life. The old man came up to Mark and hugged him affectionately. The Ford hummed pleasantly again. Mark sat down on the seat. Alexander, smiling, pressed the gas pedal. They drove toward the sunrise. The men only now noticed that it was morning. Alexandra, Mark began softly. You can call me brother, the grandfather smiled. What did you want to ask? Tell me, how did you get it into your head to convert this car into a race car? Alexander clucked his tongue with pleasure. He liked talking about his Ford more than anything else. Well, it was a young thing. In the 90s, we did whatever we wanted. I got the car from my grandfather. It became my favorite piece of machinery. I didn't even want to trade it in for something better. It was a betrayal to me. My partner helped me stuff the car with all the gas pedals and we started racing. If I'm gone someday, don't sell the Ford, you can have it. It's a good, solid car. What are you doing? Mark smiled. We'll race with you again, brother. The car disappeared into the morning fog. Only its pleasant murmur could be heard. A new day was beginning. A new era, full of unknowns and gifts of fate, was beginning.